way on trying to drive a circular economy from the business perspective, and what can we all do to work together, creating the Green Team San Joaquin. Just amazing work that you guys have done for so many years, and I just really appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your cooperation with all of you and the partnership, but Frank gets a big hand on that, and Lyndon and all the volunteers that work with him. They deserve 100% of the credit.
Oh, Frank.
Well, he leads away, but you're all there to support. You all make him look good. That's the important thing.
Well, that's hard to argue with. So
I'm right, Lyndon, right. But thanks, Heidi. Appreciate it very much.
We should appreciate your support too, Heidi. And thank you for always being there for us.
Yes.
Always, as long as I'm walking and breathing.
From that Golden Arrow Award back in the day.
2010. That was 11 years ago. You guys won the first Golden Arrow Award.
Wow. 11
That's
years
how
already?
long it's been. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, as I'm about to say here, this is the 17th REXPO, believe it or not. That's crazy.
Is it really?
17th REXPO. Huh. We're getting old.
I know. My gray hairs are reminding me.
What do you mean we?
We've got 52 people, and we're at
what
6
do you mean
after.
we?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'll do a quick introduction, Heidi, and then I'll toss it to you.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the REXPO, the last straw, 2021. This is a little different this year with virtual Zoom meeting, but we appreciate your time, and we're going to get started right away here. I want to introduce myself. I'm Lyndon Coffey with American Recycling and co-chair of the Green Team San Joaquin. I want to thank the California Recycling Market Development Zone Association and the California Green Business Network and community champions Kaiser Permanente, King Card Club, and Port of Stockton, and all the community investors of the Green Team San Joaquin. Also, please thank REXPO Steering Club and Committee, Heidi Sanborn, John Davis, Steve Lotz, Danielle Medrano, and Nick Lapis for their work in putting together today's program. Also, special thank to the Greater Stockton Chamber of Commerce for their 17th REXPO, the last straw. Round of applause on that one. That's fantastic. Quick thing before I hand it over to Heidi, please enter your organization, name, and email in the chat box. Okay. Also, please keep your microphones on mute. This is the key with our Zoom reality show here. And on mute. If you have questions, please put the question in the chat box. All right. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it to Heidi Sanborn. She's the chair of the Statewide Commission on Recycling Markets and Curbside Recycling. Please welcome Heidi Sanborn.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much, Lyndon. And I want to thank you again to Frank Farrell and Doug Wilhoit and all the great players over at the San Joaquin Chamber of Commerce who have been such great leaders in our nation, or in our really nation and state, on driving green business here in California by starting the San Joaquin Green Team. So I've been working with them for well over 10 years now, and we continue to lead the nation in trying to find a way for business to work together with advocates and driving a circular economy. So thanks to everybody for being here. And again, please add your name and your emails in the chat so everybody knows who's here. And hopefully we can create more relationships and spawn more great synergies from this meeting today. So welcome again to the REXPO, the last straw. And REXPO is short for the Recycling Expo. This is now our 17th. I can't believe it. It's our 17th of REXPO. And we're bringing people together every year to try and address another waste issue, another problem, another way to drive green business in California. This year, we're really focusing on the challenges that we're facing to stop releasing plastics into the environment, burying them in landfills or burning them, which can create dioxin. So what can we do with this the plastics that we've all seen are such a problem? And where are they coming from? What products have plastic or are plastic? Sometimes even that's a question people aren't sure of. So I was going to do a short little introduction on this issue, what we've been doing in California, what we're continuing to do, and the stuff that's in the legislature this year. And we're going to turn it over to Nick Lapis with Californians Against Waste and Christine Wolf with Recology. They'll give us an update at 8:20 about the legislative fixes on being proposed in the legislature this year. And then we're going to turn it over to Manuel Medrano at 9:30. He's going to facilitate a panel of 4 people working on different areas of this. We're going to have Paul Bennett, the president and CEO of REXPO Industries, Eric Nelson, who used to be with Interface Carpet, now with Aquafil Carpet Recycling, Octavio Vital with Green Impact Plastics. He works on thermoforms. And then Hendrik Dullinger, the VP in Business Development with Pre-Zero US, which is working on both organics and plastics. And then, of course, we're very lucky today to have Rachel Mackey-Wagner, the new director of Cal Recycle, close us out with her vision and what she sees happening with plastics and recycling here in California. She was just appointed by the governor just a few months ago. She just started in January, so we're very excited to have her. But she's not new to the issue or new to the world of waste management. So with that, I will share my screen and we can get into the presentation. So let me get to my slideshow. Can you see the slides? Hopefully. Okay. So I will go ahead and just get started, and I'll start with who I am. So I'm, again, Heidi Sanborn. I'm the Executive Director of the National Stewardship Action Council. We are almost 6 years old, believe it or not, in June. And we are 501c4 nonprofit that is networked proponents of governments and businesses and consumers that advocate that producers have a fair share of responsibility in driving the circular economy. And our vision is that we achieve a circular economy in the United States. And we need to do that, we think, through collaboration, not just legislation. And we're very proud of our effort in diversity. We think that driving a circular economy has to be fair for all. And we take that very seriously. We did a recruitment and added more diversity to our board. And we're very pleased to have done that because we feel we should all be representing all the people that we serve. So this is our board, ranging, people from Texas and Ohio and all up and down California, Washington, and more. And I just want to remind everybody that the earth is circular. People say to me, how are you ever going to get to zero waste? Well, we interrupted a natural system of zero waste. Everything on this earth is recycled infinitely. That was the beauty of nature and how it was designed. What we did was interrupt it. We created materials and molecules that nature does not recognize and cannot digest and cannot recirculate. And that's where we're getting into very serious problems. And plastics is a very big part of that problem. So to say we can't get to zero is untrue. We can, but we have to undo the damage we've done by interrupting nature's natural systems, which are zero waste. And what I like to remind everybody what a circular economy is, at least the Ellen MacArthur Foundation definition that we follow, which is that it's a multifaceted focus on producers embracing sustainable design using regenerative materials and collecting end-of-life products and materials for continuous use in the economy. So there's 3 founding principles of a circular economy. We start by designing waste out and designing out pollution. So design is key. That means producers are key. Then 2 is keeping those products and materials in use. I spoke with a professor from Florida 2 days ago who I got into a bit of an argument with because he was not even discussing designing out waste and pollution, only keeping materials in use. But again, the definition of a circular economy is we have to have both of those things in addition to getting back to regenerating natural systems. We have harmed natural systems. We can't continue to do less bad with 7, 8, 9 billion people. We have to actually start going back and regenerating that natural systems we've harmed. So it's all 3 things. So what are we doing in California about plastics? We clearly lack circularity. Our recycling rates are very low for most plastics, and some don't get recycled at all. We lack harmony of the resins. There's so many different resin types. People are confused. In fact, we all know that the 7 resin is an other category. It's kind of the bucket for all the resins that we really don't have the ability to identify right now. So truth in labeling, chasing arrows, do they mean recycling? The public think they do when they don't. Markets, we're calling exports recycling when they're not necessarily getting recycled. Using glues and labels that contaminate our streams. colored plastics that contaminate our streams of clean plastic, clear plastic. And then there's a lot of collection problems. Sometimes we have more demand than we have actual collection. So there's a lot of work to do here. No shortage of work for all of us. And a quick history of some of the actions that, and I'm sure this is not comprehensive, but just to give a sample, I mean, how far back this is going. The State Agency Buy Recycled campaign started in 1989, trying to close the loop on some plastic products as well as other materials. The Rigid Plastic Packaging Containers Bill passed in 1991, trying to get at the rigid plastic containers, the big heavy Tide bottles and so forth, and setting recycled content mandates and lightweighting options. The Plastic Trash Bags Law in 1993, recycled content in trash bags. Carpet stewardship in 2010. A lot of people think of carpet as a natural material, but most carpet is not wool. It is plastic. And so it's got a huge greenhouse gas footprint and a great ability to also be recycled. We also have carpet stewardship cleanup legislation. That original bill was not very tight on a lot of levels, and we've tried to clean it up twice, and it's a good thing we did. We'll talk about that in a minute. The recycled content for bottles in 2020, that passed last year, the Ting bill, and we've got lots of bills coming this year. And I'll talk about why I think we're seeing so many bills this year, and then we'll turn it over to Nick and Christine to talk about the bills that are in play. But one of the bills that we worked on more recently in 2017 is AB 1158, the cleanup bill to the carpet stewardship program, which added hard recycling rates and dates, an advisory committee so stakeholders had input, prevents fee money from being used to pay fines or sue the state, which we're very glad we passed that because they just got fined yesterday. And we don't want that $1 million to be coming from visible fee money the consumer pays for recycling. And mandates trades get some funding for apprenticeships on how to properly manage the carpet at end of life. And that led to a new plant. Aquafil cited a carpet recycling plant in Woodland based on our passage of that bill. It's zero emissions. It's creating 50 to 70 new jobs. It's closing the loop. They're taking everything from nylon 6 fishing net to nylon 6 carpet and making it into new product. But I want to make sure everybody hears this. The biggest problem they have now is getting enough feedstock. So everyone out there that's listening, if you have nylon 6 anything, then please talk to Aquafil. And Eric will talk about this, Eric Nelson from Aquafil later. But that truly is a circular economy model. I've seen that plant, original plant in Slovenia. That's where I am in the bottom right picture with Franco Rossi, who's the Aquafil USA president, and then Giulio Bonazzi, who's president of the company. And they are so proud and have every right to be for their system, where it's usually using no chemicals and really closing the loop on nylon 6, where they create brand new pellets that are just like virgin pellets that can be used for Stella McCartney handbags, Kelly Slater's outer known surfwear, and even interface carpets. And last year, again, we did, or this year, we have a bill. Just wanted to highlight this one on thermoforms. I think probably Octavio will be speaking to this, but this is a post-consumer content bill where thermoforms would be required to have 10% post-consumer recycled content by 2024, 20% by 2027, and 30% by 2030. And this is a lot of what you're seeing across the country is the drive for mandates on recycled content to drive the markets, because we can't keep competing with subsidized oil, a virgin product, and get a fair and level playing field for recycled content. We're going to have to start driving it, it looks like, through recycled content bills. We're seeing a lot of that. And I want to mention that when I was with the California Product Stewardship Council, we joined the California Foundation for the Environment and the Economy specifically to start educating legislators and taking them on study trips to Canada and other locations around the world so they could see what we were seeing and how producers were being more responsible around the world for their products. And we were very excited. We did the first trip in 2019. This particular picture, we have, Eric Patashner with Recology in there with me, and Shari Asfari from LA County, but Senator Skinner, State Treasurer Fiona Ma, Assemblymember Aguilar Curry, they're all now carrying bills on this issue because they've seen what can be done in our systems to improve them and get a much more producer responsibility and more closed loop systems that work. And that's in an actual Merlin plastics plant up in Vancouver, Canada. The study trip we did last year was in Seattle and Portland because of the COVID crisis. And you can see Senator Allen came, Assemblymember Laura Friedman, who's carrying bills this year. That's at the MRF, the Recology MRF up in Seattle. And then State Treasurer Fiona Maas, the bottom right, and her staff, Nancy Robles. And they're really, I really appreciate legislators and staff of the state who will learn and go on these trips because it took a week of their time. And we don't have that kind of attention to our issue often. So we're very, very grateful for that. And we're doing another trip this July. We're going to be going to Toronto, Canada, and which is in Ontario province, and then over back to Vancouver and British Columbia, which has both EPR for bottle bill and an EPR standing side by side, extended producer responsibility for packaging, which is obviously plastics. In our trip last year, we also went to, you can see us there with Assemblymember Grayson in the control room at a Covanta plant. I wanted people to see what is a combustion plant look like. There's a lot of misinformation about those. It's me with our staff, Jordan, and then on the bottom right is with Camille Herrera with Driscoll's. They are the berry company that puts a lot of their berries into the thermoforms, and they want those back. They want to get higher post-consumer content. Unfortunately, in California, the thermoforms are being bailed up with a lot of our bottle bill materials, and until the law changes, and there is a law that plans to do that based on the commission's recommendations this year, and Nick will talk about it, that will address that problem because they're getting bailed into with the bottles and cans and then getting disposed instead of recycled. So briefly, I'll just give an update on the commission. I'm chair with the Alameda Supervisor, Richard Weiss, vice chair. We have a 17-member commission. This was created in law. Actually, a assembly member at the time, Susan Eggman, created the law, who's from Stockton. So thank you to her and her staff for passing the law that created the commission, appointed by Cal EPA. And we are pretty broad representation of the industry in California. We've got a lot of our commissioners here, Manuel Medrano from Chula Vista, Eric Patashner and Christine Wolf for Ecology. So we've got a lot of good broad, LA County is on the board, Del Norte is on the commission. So we've got a broad group and we vote literally 17-0. We are a consensus group and we came up with a report submitted in December in 6 months with 19 recommendations for the state. And just a reminder to everybody, make sure you mute yourself. Thank you. Although it's a very cute sound. So our statewide commissioners are very active. We spent over 1,200 hours doing a 94-page report that we gave to the legislature in December. It's resulted already in quite a few bills, which I know Christine and Nick will be talking about next. And I would encourage you, I'll go back to this slide, that you can go to the commission's page. We have another meeting next Wednesday. We're starting to wind up our last report due for this year, which will be July 1st. We'd love your input. We've even put a model policy recommendation up so that the public can submit to us a policy proposal they think we might have missed. Everything is webcast. My staff, Jordan Wells, she records all these commission meetings and posts them on our YouTube page for you to see. We try to be as transparent as possible and as open as possible. And I encourage your input. So again, what is California doing about plastics? There's a lot to do. There's no shortage of things to do. And a lot of it's coming up in bills this year, which we'll turn over to Nick and Christina to talk about. But I would say it is time to get into some good trouble. Never be afraid to make some noise and get into good and necessary trouble. We are really at a crossroads here, and we've got to start making this work. It is not working. We're losing way too much to the environment that can't digest plastic. There's a lot of circularity being lost because we don't have the collection systems. We aren't investing in those systems. We aren't making them a priority. And we're not labeling things correctly so people can sort the materials correctly and their plastics correctly for clean sorts. So with that, thank you very much again to the Stockton Chamber of Commerce. And we'll go ahead and I'll turn it over now to Nick Lapis with Californians Against Waste and Christine Wolf with Recology to go over the pending legislation and propositions in California that relate to our topic today. Thank you very much. So now I'll stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Nick and Christine.
Good morning. Thank you, Heidi. That was a great introduction and great summary of where we are. I think there's going to be a little bit of overlap, and I think that's a sign of all of us working together on a lot of these different issues. Let me just share my screen. I think, Frank, can you make me a co-host so I can share my screen? Oh, I can. Okay. All right, can folks see that? Okay, so I apologize in advance. I learned how to use stock footage as a background in a PowerPoint. And it's kind of like when you're first learning PowerPoint, you learn about the star wipe. I might have gone a little overboard with it, so I apologize in advance. So my name is Nick Lapis with Californians Against Waste. We're an environmental organization based in Sacramento. Work very closely with Heidi and her predecessor organization on legislation and policy around recycling and zero waste, circular economy, plastic pollution, et cetera. You know, I've been a part of the San Joaquin Green Team's Recycling Bin Coalition, I think, since close to the beginning, probably a little over a decade ago. And it's interesting seeing how many of these things that are currently happening sort of started off as ideas they're kind of incubated in the Recycling Bin Coalition in our first white paper that we did, whenever that was, 12 years ago or whenever that was. And so seeing some of that finally end up in legislation is kind of an interesting process. I'm going to very quickly talk about last year, actually the last legislative session. So last year there was a big bill introduced. It was actually two bills. There was a companion bill in the Assembly and in the Senate, SB 54 and AB 1080. And they were the first time, I think, in California that this has been proposed, but basically turning over the ability to regulate packaging and single-use items to the state agency, CalRecycle. We have Director Wagner speaking later, so her department. And the model there sort of the way, you know, with the Clean Air Act, the legislature doesn't pass a bill telling each factory what kind of scrubber they need to have. They set goals and they turn over the actual implementation to the experts at the State Air Resources Board. And that's kind of how we handle big problems, right? Whether it's environmental stuff, like again, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, you know, I mean, I could go on and on, AB 32, et cetera. But also outside of the environment, that's how we handle things like OSHA and worker safety, right? We don't have the legislature passing individual bills on what kind of PPE you need when you're working with whatever power tool. We let the experts really handle the minutia. And so that was kind of the proposal in these bills was let's turn over the authority to a state agency and then give them guardrails in terms of here's, you know, what we want you to do. The bill fell 4 votes shy of passage on the last night of session. I think, frankly, kind of just ran out of time, although I see on the participant list, we have some opponents of the bill too, so maybe they could give their take on why they think it didn't pass. But the bill did not pass, and there are kind of a couple of things that led out of that. One was the Recycling Commission that that Heidi talked about, that Heidi is the chair of. That the commission really did come out of the work of the Recycling Bin Coalition. It was a recommendation way back when in our recycling bin white paper, again, over a decade ago. And the bill creating the commission passed in 2020, and all the work was done last year. And so the commission really came together and started identifying opportunities to advance a lot of these issues and tackle them from a multi-pronged approach. And then in response to both the commission recommendations and in response to the failure of the bill, the legislature kind of took a slightly different approach this year, where the bill last year had, I think, 23 co-authors. This year, many of those have decided to introduce their own bills. So we have a lot of legislation introduced this year covering a wide variety of topics. It's all stuff that is sort of designed to be complementary to a comprehensive policy, but it is tackling important pieces of it. So whether it's things that were commission recommendations or important pieces of SB 54 that are standalone bills, we've never, I don't think we've ever in the state seen this much legislative interest in our issues, which is exciting. And it's also overwhelming a little bit. And so I'm going to touch on some of the highlight bills, although frankly, there's so many good bills that in another year, some of the ones that didn't even make the cut for my PowerPoint because I couldn't figure out how to combine them thematically with another bill, would in and of themselves have been a point of discussion for this group. So there's a lot out there. And then the other thing that I'm not going to get into is the ballot measure that came out of the failure of the legislation last year as well. And Christine Wolf from Recology is going to talk about that immediately after me. So we'll get into that afterwards. Again, apologize for learning how to add stock footage to the background of my PowerPoint slides. So there are a couple different themes that the legislature is focused on. One key theme, and Heidi mentioned this, one key theme is truth in recycling. And again, something that this group has been talking about for a really long time, but really I think recycling is sort of at a crossroads. You really can't turn on the television without seeing a documentary, a news story about how recycling is bogus, recycling is greenwashing for single-use products, recycling, stuff doesn't actually get recycled, it gets shipped overseas where it gets dumped into the ocean. And compostables aren't truly compostable, they don't really break down, and etc. And so I feel like we're sort of at an existential crossroads when it comes to recycling. And until we can tell the consumers with a straight face, hey, recycling is real, these are the things that are recyclable, they're going to lose faith in the system. And if they lose faith in the system, they're not going to bother to separate their products. They're not going to bother to fund rate increases that are going to be necessary. And it becomes a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. Recycling becomes not real because the public doesn't think it is. So in that spirit, I'm going to go through a couple of bills in this area. The first is a legislation by Senator Allen that prohibits the chasing arrows on products that aren't truly recyclable. Pretty simple concept, one that I think all of us who work in anything related to garbage have probably had this conversation at Thanksgiving at some point, where somebody's standing next to a recycling bin and they're about to put the wrong thing into the bin, and you go up and you're like, oh, that actually goes in the trash. And they say, no, but it has the recycling symbol on the bottom, right? And the public clearly associates having the chasing arrows as meaning that something is recyclable. And there's been research done for a long time, many different studies that have shown that, including studies commissioned by the manufacturers. people see the chasing arrows and they think that means recyclable. So it's a pretty easy change in many ways, but it could have a pretty big impact. AB 881 by Assemblymember Gonzalez prohibits, well, actually doesn't prohibit, but it basically says that if you export mixed plastics overseas, that can no longer count towards a jurisdiction's local government diversion requirements. So now it'll be disposal instead of recycling. And again, for way too long, we've treated anything that goes into a shipping container as being recycled. And something this group has talked about for a really long time now is, well, how do we keep those products here? How do we reintroduce them into our manufacturing economy as raw inputs, as opposed to shipping them overseas and, best case scenario, turning over our valuable resources to other countries. Worst case scenario, having them be mismanaged. So the bill doesn't completely prohibit the export of all plastic. It does specify that if you're sending a bale of an individual grade of plastics, let's say it's a bale of PET, you can still do that. That stuff has a lot of value and nobody is paying that much for a bale to throw it away. But what you can't do is take a mixed plastic and send that overseas. And the other benefit of that is that for a long time, local governments have been telling their customers, put all your plastic in the bin, and all of that plastic would get baled together and sent overseas. And so people would interpret anything plastic as being recyclable. And that is not true, but it also leads to poor design decisions by manufacturers, where there's a lot of value to something being called recyclable from a PR perspective. But from the general public's perspective, it's all equally recyclable because it all goes overseas. And so hopefully by limiting exports to things that really do have markets, it'll lead people to make design decisions such as using, if you're making a beverage, put it in a PET or an HDPE bottle, choosing recyclable options. And then the third one in this category is about compostable products. This is one where we've gone back and forth over the years. And again, there are a lot of people marketing their products as bio-based, and biodegradable, and oxo-degradable, and Dasani has their PET plant bottle, and there's things like Spudware and all these other things that the consumers don't know what actually can and can't get composted. And if we want to roll out,
Excuse me, folks, could you please mute your microphone? Thank you. Go ahead, Nick.
does that include me?
Not you. No, Nick. You keep yours on for now.
Okay. And so this bill basically says we're going to limit what can be called compostable in California. We're going to require third-party certification, require clear labeling that makes it obvious to consumers and to composters that something is compostable. We're going to require that those products be eligible for use in organic agriculture, which has been a big barrier to composters wanting to accept them. And we're going to prohibit toxic ingredients that could end up in compost, like PFAS, the fluorinated chemicals, Teflon chemicals. So it's really kind of a comprehensive reform of what is compostable. And that's going to be crucial as we roll out composting programs in the next couple of years. The other general theme, so that was truth in recycling. The other general theme I'll say is a circular economy. And Heidi talked through a great definition of what a circular economy is. And I sort of think of it as building recycling markets and closing the loop. So there are a few bills in this category. The first I'll highlight is the Bottle Bill Modernization Bill, AB 1454. And it's a comprehensive bill that tackles a lot of different issues within the bottle bill. So I think the most pressing issue that comes to everybody's mind when it comes to the bottle bill is consumer access to recycling and the fact that we've lost recycling centers all over the state. So the bill invests in reopening recycling centers. It increases how much they get paid based on need. It also provides loans, and some of the loans are forgivable for reopening recycling centers, a few other things in that category as well. But it also includes incentives for MRFs to separate material into greater quantities, greater different number of types. So there's a plastic quality incentive payment in there. And then a lot of small tweaks, like for example, the California bottle bill currently doesn't allow electronic payments. And so if you can't do electronic payments, then you can't do something like a bag drop system where you drop off a bag of recyclables with a barcode and then it gets credited to your account later. And there are a few other things that could really modernize the system that weren't necessarily thought of when the bill was written in 1986. There are a bunch of changes. There are more changes being talked about. I think that this will create a modern bottle bill in California. AB 478 will require recycled content in thermoform containers. And I know we have Octavio on the line, so he's going to talk about this in much, much greater detail. But again, it's things are not recyclable if they don't get recycled. And in the case of something like a PET thermoform container, yeah, it's still a #1 plastic, and #1 plastics are allowed in almost every program in the state. But realistically, they are currently a contaminant with the bottles. Even though they are totally recyclable, we don't have the infrastructure in place. We don't have enough demand for thermoform minimum content on the back end to pull it through the system. And so Heidi had a slide on this. I won't get into all the details of the rates and dates involved, but it's pretty aggressive. And the goal is to help companies like Octavio's really expand and build markets for thermoforms. And then, it's not just about PET thermoforms. There are a lot of other materials that also are thermoformed plastic. And again, hopefully some combination of increasing recycled content, increasing recycling rates, and transitioning to more recyclable options. Oh shoot, 289 was not supposed to be on the slide. I have a whole separate slide for it. This is supposed to be a completely different bill, and I'm blanking on what it is, so I apologize. This is what happens when you make the PowerPoint the night before. So a circular economy includes making producers bear the costs of handling their products. And the legislature sort of tackled individual products off and on, whether it's carpets, mattresses, paint, thermostats. And ultimately, the commission recommended, and we agree, that there should be a comprehensive approach to handling producer responsibility for hard to handle toxic products. But barring that, the most pressing issue we have right now is battery recycling. And the reason it's such a pressing issue is the number of batteries and products is increasing very, very quickly. But almost more important than that, the chemistry of the batteries that's used is changing rapidly. And rechargeable lithium-ion batteries, which used to be only used in very high-tech applications, are now being used in disposable products, things like e-cigarettes that get used once and then tossed. And that's created havoc in the recycling system because they are so flammable and they cause such damage. The video you're watching is at the Shoreline Environmental Center in San Mateo County, where it just shows what happens when a lithium-ion battery ends up in a MRF in recycling equipment. And this is one of, I think, 3 fires they had that have burned down their entire facility, causing millions, tens of millions of dollars in damage. And so given the increase in the frequency of these batteries, we really need to find a way to give consumers an easy way to recycle the batteries. If we're purely relying on them, taking them to a HHW facility that's probably somewhere on the outskirts of town, that isn't going to cut it. People aren't going to be able to recycle their batteries at a rate that's that will prevent these fires that are happening at a greater and greater frequency. So it's a producer-run system. It tells the battery manufacturers, you figure it out, but you have to make sure that there are take-back opportunities at retailers that sell batteries. There's convenient access for people, etc. And it's a work in progress, but it's a very urgent issue, and it's one of the issues that has such an obvious visual to it that I gave it its own slide just so I can include the video. Another theme for this year is source reduction, and really going back to the reduce and reuse part of reduce, reuse, recycle. And we're all, I think, or maybe I'll speak for myself, I tend to be guilty of focusing on the recycling and not thinking about the higher end, the higher and better uses, the reduce and reuse. And the legislature is beginning to spend more time focusing on that as well. So a few bills in this area, AB 962 on refillable beverage containers, basically making them eligible for the same payments that recyclers get under the bottle bill. It's a pretty simple fix. Right now, if you crush a glass bottle and recycle it, you get paid through the bottle bill. If you wash it to reuse it, you don't. It creates a perverse incentive to recycle instead of reusing. And there are some great companies started in California that really want to get into this business. It's a little bit of a back to the future scenario because, you know, this used to be the norm, right? Another source reduction bill, waste prevention bill, is AB 1276 by Wendy Carrillo. And if you remember a couple of years ago, the legislature passed a bill requiring plastic straws to only be available upon request. And if you only saw the news stories about it, you probably think California banned straws, and you know there's a straw police out there that's going to arrest you if you have one on your body. The truth is, it doesn't do any of that. It basically says they're going to affirmatively ask you if you want a straw before giving you one. And all this bill does is expand that to other takeout accessories, utensils, stirrers, condiment packets, napkins, etc. And it also expands it to delivery. And I think that's something that, if you're anything like me, you've been getting a lot of Postmates, Grubhub, Uber Eats over the last year. And I always find it really funny when, you know, you're getting this food delivered to your house with a bunch of single-use silverware, and that ends up piling up in your drawer because you have real silverware, you're at your house. And in addition to the wastefulness of that, it is a real cost to businesses, it's a real cost to the restaurants. But switching that to an opt-in model would make a pretty big impact. And then the last thing the bill does is it says that for restaurants that have dishwashing capacity, dine-in should be served on reusable containers, so, or reusable, you know, cups and plates and all of that, which again used to be the norm, but now you walk into a Starbucks and you see they have, you know, walk into a Starbucks and they have reusable mugs and glasses, but everybody who's sitting there drinking coffee is drinking it out of a to-go cup. And that's pretty low-hanging fruit for waste prevention. It does specifically say that it doesn't apply when there is a state of emergency, public health emergency. So it's really when we come out on the other end of this pandemic. And AB 1371 tackles e-commerce packaging, so think Amazon shipping, stuff like that, bans plastic e-commerce packaging that's unrecyclable. So plastic envelope pouches, packing peanuts, sealed air, and there are recyclable alternatives to all those that do get used, and there are other countries that do mandate them. So again, I think during the pandemic, we've all seen a lot more deliveries and a lot more of this stuff piling up in our own houses. Oh, wait, is that it? Yeah. Now a gratuitous photo of my son. I was going to try to think of some recycling related reason why I needed to include this, but mostly I just like showing off my baby. Here's my contact information. And with that, I'll turn it over to Christine from Recology, who's going to talk a little bit about the ballot measure.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. We all need to see that, I think. So it's a good way to start the day. And let's see, can I share my screen?
You should be able to, Christine, just click the share screen button.
Oh, I got it now. Thank you. Okay. So I'm not as, capable as Nick in terms of GIF creation, so you'll have to forgive me. But so I want to talk a little bit about the ballot initiative that we have been working on. By we, I mean Californians Against Waste, Recology, and a really strong cohort of environmental groups like NRDC, the Nature Conservancy, Oceana, a lot of the oceans folks, working together to put a plastic pollution reduction initiative before the voters in California. So I'm going to go over a little bit about sort of where we are in the process, what the initiative would do, and then we can talk a little bit about sort of how that compares with the legislation that Nick just talked about, as well as, the legislation that is moving forward. And hopefully we can get into some time for questions. So the initiative is meant to deal with this 8 million tons of plastics that enters the ocean every year. I think a lot of us have heard this, statistic before that there will be more plastic than fish in the ocean by 2050, that less than 10% of single-use plastic is actually recycled. And that microplastics are ending up everywhere from inside our bodies, in the snow, in environments across the earth. And I think this is really what sort of tipped folks' interest in this across the country, and which is why we're seeing a lot of work in the legislatures on various plastics bills, including this concept that Heidi talked about extended producer responsibility and really bringing product manufacturers and plastic manufacturers in particular to the table. Just a lot of really frightening stories about where plastic is ending up. But, and I know that we've all been doing this work for a long time, that there are materials that are better than plastic that don't sort of produce this toxic end of life situation. And that, that there are still some plastics that are recyclable, and we should be, prioritizing those plastics that are recyclable over those that aren't. And that there must be some way to get at this issue around, the low cost of virgin plastic and the higher cost of recycled plastic, and trying to find a way to equalize that so we can really start to incentivize recycled content in the marketplace, as well as moving away from the harmful effects of plastic production and our dependence on petroleum. So what the initiative would do would set the strongest regulations on single-use plastics in the country. It would ban styrofoam foodware, and it would shift the marketplace to materials for packaging that are recyclable, compostable, reusable, or refillable by 2030. The big thing the initiative would do, which is something that we heard a lot, if you were listening to the conversations around SB 54 and AB 1080 last year, the bills that Nick talked about, there was a lot of concern justified or not, that there wasn't dedicated funding in those bills. And so what the initiative would do would tie some of the policy work that we've been talking about with funding. So the initiative would put an up to a 1 cent fee on all single-use plastic items sold in California. It's a variable fee. So CalRecycle sets the fee. It could be less than 1 cent, but it's up to 1 cent per package. And this money would be used to help communities that have been disproportionately impacted by, plastic production, petroleum production, produce and support the production of compost to help get us away from dependence on pesticides and, reduced water use, and hopefully support our local agricultural communities. It would help support cleanups at our beaches and in our estuaries, our riverways. It would keep our parks and open spaces healthy in the face of climate change. And I think, of relevance to a lot of the folks who are on the phone, it would support the production of strong, robust, in California markets for composting and recycling, so that we can build jobs locally and make sure that we're doing recycling and composting the right way, and get at a lot of the issues that the legislation that Nick's talked about are trying to get at. So this is something that I think we talk about in the industry a lot. How do we compete with the low cost of virgin resin? Especially in this kind of economy, it's so difficult for recycled plastics to compete with virgin resin. That's something we hear a lot from the brands as well as recycling facilities. I'm sure folks are going to talk about that later. And clearly we've all been doing a lot of work to try to equalize that. And so this is one attempt to get at that issue by putting this fee on plastic packaging and single-use foodware. The estimated revenue that it would bring into the state would be between $1 billion and $3 billion annually for all of these uses. And so the funds would be 30% goes to the Natural Resources Agency at the state to support beach cleanup, water restoration, estuaries, bays, the Delta, and really looking at natural resource funds and supporting cleanups and sort of the mitigation of the impacts of pollution. 50% would go to CalRecycle to incentivize the development of recycling and composting infrastructure. So it's not just incentivizing plastic market development. There's also money would also go to fiber market development, glass market development, and grant programs for a lot of the sorts of initiatives that local governments have been working on around education, outreach, getting reusables more integrated into our everyday life. So we're really trying to shift away from the sort of single use or focus on recycling only, and really looking at the whole picture and getting a good chunk of money to CalRecycle to look at ways to do that. And then a significant portion of the funds would also support climate resilience of parks and forests. 30% of the money would go to local governments to support cleanup and local recycling programs. Something that's really important to a lot of our coalition is supporting regenerative agriculture and supporting our local farmers and making sure that they have access to the resources that they need, and that composting can be a part of those programs. Of the funds that are going to CalRecycle and to local governments, up to 30% of those funds would go to communities impacted by pollution and poverty. So the disadvantaged communities would have an allocated minimum of funds. So we're making sure that we're taking care of the people who need to be prioritized. So I want to talk a little bit about where we are. Some of these results are from the polling that we did before COVID, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the results that we've been seeing lately. So we have really good support from the public on this issue. 6 out of 10 California voters would support a ballot measure to reduce single-use plastics. Of those, we have a strong percentage leaning definitely yes. People know how they feel about this issue. It's either that, concerned about taxing plastics or really knowing that we have to do something about this issue, and the really supporting a robust in-state recycling system that would create jobs. People had a lot of strong support for, again, this was before COVID, reducing waste, preventing the styrofoam containers, and requiring the regulatory process that would move forward through CalRecycle, which is what the initiative would create. So we have good, strong support on that. And really looking at, there's a lot of support in the initiative as well for sort of the natural resources and, reduction in water use due to a lot of these measures that we would take. But we still have good support for the recycling components of the initiative. Again, I'm going to skip through some of this, and some of it's old, but we still, I think we've seen what's happened over the last year. We've had a lot of time to reflect on a lot of difficult issues, and we still have pretty strong support from the public on some initial polling results that I can't share formally, but from what we've seen from a recent polling we've done is that we're still coming out strong. We haven't lost the voters. They're with us. They still really want to take this to the ballot. So we're ready. We're committed to moving forward. And we're thinking that we'll be on the November 2022 ballot. We'll be officially qualified at the end of April. So that's exciting. So we'll really sort of launch the campaign then and make sure that we're getting communications out to everyone who wants to support us. We're also going to be doing a lot of fundraising from folks in the community, working with partners sort of across the spectrum, whether or not you can give money or if you can endorse and you can work in the community. We need all the support we can to really run a full campaign. So we're excited to work with all of you. These are some of our partners so far. A lot of folks from the regenerative agriculture community, the oceans community, and some reuse and brands, which is really exciting to see that we have some sustainable brands who are coming into this and realizing that this is sort of the next frontier for them to do what they need to do. And I'll actually share the endorsement link in the chat after this, so that if folks are interested in endorsing personally or as an organization, you can sign on and start to get some of the communications around the campaign. For the local government folks, we're definitely interested in working with you through the process to see if that's something that your city or county is interested in. So we're excited. We're ready to go. It's going to be a big lift, but I think because we're trying to tackle this holistically, this is our attempt to do that. So, I think we haven't seen quite yet what the legislature is going to put forward in terms of a holistic solution like Nick talked about. But it'll be, interesting to see what comes out of it, given that this will be in the background. And I think we anticipate that the opposition to the initiative will maybe bring forward something, but we've yet to see what that is. So we're, ready to talk in the legislature and see what's out there, but we're also moving forward with this campaign. We're ready to go on the ballot. We've gotten our initial signature validation numbers, and we know we're going to qualify. So that's really exciting. And we're ready to do this, and so is the public. So happy to take questions on how the initiative sort of corresponds with the legislation, or any questions that folks have for me or Nick. You're on mute, Nick.
Sorry. We have until 9:30 for questions and answers. So let's open it up. And again, questions for me or Christine, or let's throw in some questions for Heidi too, because she's here. So.
And I would suggest if people could put your questions in the chat, that would be easier than having 80 people maybe open up their line at the same time.
Yeah, I know that's a good suggestion. Actually, instead of typing out your question in the chat, just put in that you have a question and we'll call on you. That way it's not just our voices over and over.
Yeah, the commission way. Okay, and Christine put the initiative endorsement link in the chat so everybody can go there.
And if people don't have questions, I'm going to start calling on people.
There's one. It's for you, Nick.
So the question is, what was the bill number that requires the recycling symbol to be left off of non-recyclable items? And that's SB 343. Let's see if I'm swimming in bill numbers a little bit because it's still pretty early in the year, but I believe it's, yep, SB 343 by Senator Allen.
Nick, I did want to mention and enhance something you did talk about on the Chasing Arrows bill, the Senator Allen SB 343, which we're co-sponsoring. I just wanted to make sure everybody knows that we're getting letters from associations of plastics groups. The companies are kind of hiding behind the brands behind these association names. They're not wanting to come out and oppose the bill with their brand name, but through associations. And there's a lot of opposition to that bill that we don't think is reasonable. And if anybody would like to weigh in on that, all we're trying to do is take a chasing recycling arrow that we know and they know is confusing the public to put it in the recycling bin when it really should be put in the trash bin off of those packages. And that was something that was actually suggested over 8 years ago from an association that had taken over that labeling, naming program. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to follow us, Nick's group, Californians Against Waste, National Stewardship Action Council, speak to the author's office. There's sign-on letters, but we really do need to, they say they have no opposition really, but then they oppose unless amended, and that's a pretty strong statement. So we really could use help with that.
So we had a question about waste for cannabis nurseries to sales. It is something that's being talked about. I'm not personally involved, but there is legislation on this issue. That's AB 318 by Mark Levine. If I recall correctly, and again, I haven't personally been involved, so maybe somebody else wants to chime in, but if I recall correctly, it would reclassify cannabis waste as a non-hazardous material that can be composted, which is something we've supported over the years. And there's no reason it can't be composted.
And I can add to that. We have at National Stewardship Action Council a whole listserv just on cannabis, and we've had entire webinars about waste from the cannabis industry. And in fact, on our tour to Seattle last year with the legislators through the California Foundation for the Environment and the Economy, we took them to a cannabis store and showed them the different issues with the packaging and also the organics waste and how to deal with that. In fact, we're trying to get a grant from the state next year that would take the cannabis stalks and actually make them into a paper pulp, which right now are being unfortunately landfilled. So there's a whole movement around cannabis, and if you're interested in that, just join us or send me an email.
Because we're a bunch of environmentalists who want cannabis to be recycled.
I'm sorry, Michael, did you mean to say that out loud to everybody? Michael? Yeah, he just muted himself. I think that was a mistake. Okay.
There's a question about soda bottles and glass and washing soda bottles, and is that being contemplated? And I think that the legislation that's being proposed would apply to soda bottles as well. It seems like the craft beer industry is a little further ahead in terms of being open to a reusable system. But hopefully once that becomes more commonplace in the craft brewing industry, people will look at it for other things like soda. So yes, it would apply to that, although I haven't actually heard of any brands proposing it at this point. We have a question from Loudsey on, can Nick and Heidi talk a little bit more about the initiative Christine described and the ideas coming from the Market Development Commission and how they may drive the legislature on these issues? So Heidi, how do you see the commission's recommendations driving the legislature?
Oh, it's huge. We were delighted how many bills they picked up from our policy. So I put in the chat earlier the link to the actual report and the 19 recommendations. But the recommendations started with first put out the fires. And that's the battery bill that Nick talked about, that they're co-sponsoring with CPSC and Rethink Waste. And then we have another one on HHW framework, which I think for producer responsibility, I think that might happen next year, not this year. But then we said we have to keep it clean and green. In order to keep things in a circle, we have to keep the toxics out to keep the costs down and the safety up in our systems. And that there's a whole lot around that. One of the recommendations we made, of course, is Nick's sponsored bill with Assemblymember Gonzalez on not giving credit for recycling for plastics exported that we cannot document are getting recycled. That's a big bill. We had so many, I'm trying to think, Nick. The bill on refillables. I know that we discussed it at the commission. We're still working on the actual policy, but getting us to the place where you can go back. I saw a couple of questions about refilling glass bottles. And as a kid, I had the same thing where we'd go to the gas station and get a Coke wood crate with a Cokes in them, and we'd return them the refillable bottles and get a new crate of Cokes. So there was zero waste in that system, really. And now we've got Conscious Container really driving those pilots now, and she just got a $500,000 grant to do that. The commission is going to probably discuss that again on Wednesday, that policy. In fact, Nick and I are working on that now with Conscious Container to bring that back, since the recycling committee has pretty much done their work already. That was the Comlogger bill. She was also on the study trip last year. Gosh, Nick, I'd have to pull out our report. We've got so many things that we're doing.
In my mind, I mean, it feels like it all sort of snowballs on itself. I mean, some of it's clear that the commission recommendations were heavily influencing legislation and legislators. But the commission recommendations, if you go through them, you look back, probably half of them were in the original bin white paper. And so it's just sort of snowballing, and everything is building on itself. Christine, for the second half of the question, how do you see the initiative affecting what's happening in the legislature?
Well, I think like Nick talked about, we had this holistic solution that really was high level and would have given CalRecycle some significant authority to do rulemaking around making the packaging recyclable, reusable, compostable, refillable, all these good things we're talking about. And I think, the opposition was successful in stopping that effort. But it really highlighted, and I think so do these trips and coming to all of our facilities and learning about our issues, it gave the legislators a chance to look at things and say, this just doesn't make sense the way it's happening. Now, the initiative is this sort of big pressure point, but it also means that there's a real proposal to bring funding to these issues so that we can actually support a lot of the initiatives that we're trying to work on. And that forces the conversation toward, how can the producers help, maybe in a different way, fund these programs. But it means that the legislators are understanding that the producers have to be a part of this system. So it's not just local governments and ratepayers and taxpayers paying for these programs or dealing with the impacts afterwards. And it's lucky that we have, innovative companies doing the work that they're doing to really start up companies recycling these products. But we need to give them some real support. And we need to make sure that, when something is recyclable or compostable, that really means something, so that there's a real market for those products. And hopefully that market is here in California, or at least here in the US. So I think having that sort of pressure point from the initiative really helps on a lot of these smaller issues around, making sure that labeling claims are real, making sure that we're really working towards a system where everything is recyclable or compostable, and we're cleaning up a lot of the sort of problems along the side. So I think that the big picture story is the, hardest for folks to wrap their minds around, but it forces them to look at what's actually causing these problems and, helps us pick out some of these little things. But it hopefully also forces, a hard look at the little amount of money we've been getting from the state. Cal Recycle has historically received insignificant funding from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, even though we're doing a lot of really important work. But also making sure that we're getting money from, producers where they can support the remanufacture of their products.
There's a question in the chat from Manuel for you, Heidi, about how do we even the playing field between virgin plastics and recycled content to support recycled content usage?
Great question. The commission is talking about this too, and I believe we'll see a proposal from one of the commissioners. I think Kobe Sky's working on it for Wednesday next week on subsidies. So we don't have a level playing field and we don't have a free market if the government is tipping the scales with subsidies for virgin extraction. Until that stops, whether it's paper, whether it's oil, we can't compete at the back end with these systems. And especially when we're getting no help from the producers or little help on making up the costs and making it more cost effective to recycle, because we're not externalizing all the costs onto the environment and onto local governments. So I think recycled content is a great way to drive and force the market, but to actually let the market work correctly is to remove the subsidies for virgin extraction. And typically if we use subsidies in government, I'm a public policy major, so I hold this near and dear to my heart, that the proper role of government is not necessarily to interfere into the market unless there's some real public health reason, some necessary reason, and you only tip the scales in a certain direction for a certain period of time to subsidize it, to let the market take hold and let it go. Like Tesla cars were very expensive originally. Now they're coming down and the market's starting to go. Do we need to keep incentivizing them? How long do we incentivize them? Same with solar, same with recycling. I mean, I think it starts, the level playing field starts with getting out of subsidizing virgin extraction. And then everything starts, the money starts flowing through the system correctly. If we want to subsidize recycling, maybe do it for a short period of time to tip the scales to get it established and going and get the price down and then let it go. But that would be all we'd need at this point. And I'm not even sure we need to subsidize recycling at all. I think we just need to make the producers pay for the negative costs at the end of the system. So that's one of the things we're looking at, is using RFIDs or using the new blockchain technology where we can track materials through the system. And the only thing the producer would pay is the negative cost at the end, not the whole cost. That some of it's already been taken care of. So these are all innovative ideas that we're looking at.
And I think the next panel is going to also touch a lot on this, because it's folks who are actually trying to make their recycled content businesses work. And so I'd be curious to get their takes as well. Ed Boyson asks if the initiative will require a 2/3 vote. The answer is no, it's a simple majority. It is a little confusing because if the same policy were introduced in the legislature, it would be a 2/3 vote. But on the statewide ballot, it is a simple majority. If we don't have anything else, I think we probably move on to the next panel. Maybe give it a second if anyone has any last minute questions.
Something real quick. There's no more questions. Why don't we take, since it's 9:18, why don't we take a 5-minute break? People can do what
Good
they
idea.
need for 5 minutes, and then we'll go to Manuel at 9:25. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
All right, we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll see you in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick and Christine. That was great.
Hello.
Hi, Frank.
Hi, who am I talking to?
Neil.
Neil,
Hey, Neil.
Howdy.
I like the glasses.
You like that?
Yeah, it's a good look.
They're my
It is.
Buddy Holly. Pegasus, Pegasus, Pegasus.
I think you got the Buddy Holly hairdo going too.
You like that, huh? Just in
Oh
case,
yeah.
just in case I'm
Very
recalled
sharp.
back in the Air Force, I'm good to go.
We should add a Frank Farrell musical interlude before the next bout.
I'm going to put some jams on right now. No, I won't.
Frank, you
Are we
asked
on
in
the break right now?
Yeah, we're still on the break.
Oh.
I mean, people can hear us, but we're still officially on the break for a minute. So Frank, you asked how can provide incentives for recycled content value-added products. So one of the things that I didn't mention, I forgot to, that was a recommendation of the commission, was updating the state agency buy recycled campaign and giving a lot more authority to Cal Recycle to change the recycled content limits, because you don't want to go back to the legislature every time, and Cal Recycle is the experts on this. But I think counties and companies can do a lot by voting with their dollars and making sure that they ask questions in RFPs about that they give preferences to higher post-consumer content, recycled content in anything, whether it's paper, plastics, what have you. That really does help drive the market tremendously. If people don't buy it, they don't keep making it. They make what people buy. So they have a lot of power to vote with their dollars.
I think the procurement policies of counties, cities, and the state need to be strengthened because right now it's dismal. It's dismal, and even for like a biodiesel or different fuels, and it's crazy because that should just be priority. I mean, that's what they should be bidding on, right? They shouldn't be bidding on anything but that. But whatever.
Heidi, that was actually the one bill that I accidentally left off. I meant to replace the Newman bill on that one slide with the Bennett Sabrack bill, and accidentally got too busy looking at videos of my baby swaying.
It's I have to tell you, it's very distracting in a very adorable way to see those videos while you're trying to focus on work.
I went back and forth about adding the audio because actually what he's saying there is he's saying hi.
Oh God, how cute is that? He is adorable.
So, okay, well, maybe give it another minute.
You know what you should get him to say is do it for me, because really he's the next generation that gets to live with whatever we do. So,
I was considering trying to make it somehow back to that. And then I just, like, everyone's going to see through this. It's just a gratuitous video. There's no logic to it. Okay, so it's 9:25. I know we were going to move on, but we have a question in the chat from Devin Jackson. We do have a little bit of time before we're supposed to start the next panel, so I think we could take the question. Go ahead, Devin. You're on the line.
Thank you very much. My quick question is, so I'm a middle school science teacher, and so with middle schoolers, I kind of see their actions, their sustainable actions as the kind of end of the line, the consumer choosing reusable versus non-reusable. And I also have done work with Sierra Club, and I've heard the question asked, is it more important to stop single-use plastics at the beginning or to encourage the consumer to not buy them? And so that's, I know, an in-depth question, and I'm sorry to bring it up during a break, but I just had that question. So either you can answer it now if you want, or throughout the rest of the day.
My personal bias on this is I think you need to go as upstream as possible if you're not focused on systems change, trying to get consumers to do something different is only, I mean, it's cleaning up the spill without turning off the faucet.
Right.
So I think it's my personal theory on this is, you know, what it comes down to is there's kind of a 20-20-60 rule where 20% of the people are going to do something because it's the right thing to do. They're going to go out of their way to choose the more sustainable option. They're going to go and buy the EV or the hybrid. They're going to, you know, opt into the utilities. Let me pay more for renewable energy choice. And then there's 20% of the people who aren't going to do it unless you're holding a gun to their head. And, you know, it's going to cost a lot of money and effort to go after those last few people who really, really don't want to do it out of spite. But most people in the middle are going to do what the most convenient option is, what the norm is, what everybody's doing, what the default choice is. And that's the lowest hanging fruit, is focusing on those folks. I think most of us are probably in that category, if we're going to be honest, where if the default is you have to ask for cutlery, you know, it's a checkbox you have to choose. Well, you know, we don't need it. We're not going to click it. If you have to ask for it not to be available, and that's not the default choice, most people aren't going to bother. So in my mind, it's all about systems change and about changing the convenient default option for people. That's my personal soapbox. I don't know, Heidi or Christine, if you want to add anything.
I agree. I mean, people are very busy, and, you know, it's not that we don't want consumer choice, but the truth is people do not have enough time to read a phone book to be educated on recycling. So what we have to do is make it simple and clear and easy and free. If we do those things, they will, easy 80%, I think, will do those things. But as Nick said, I think it really is that last 20% that will be really hard to get. They're just kind of ornery and angry, and whatever they do is what they're going to do. But most people really do want to do the right thing. And if we make it easy and clear and free, they will do it. If we have to start charging them for end-of-life disposal or recycling, it gets illegally dumped, because that has no value to them anymore. Those prices have to be built in at the front end and then throughout the system. And that's why I like the producer responsibility model and concept, devil's in the details, but it also pays for state agency oversight, and it's much simpler. So thanks for the question, Devin, and thanks for what you do teaching kids. We sure appreciate it.
There's another question from Peter about companies that use post-consumer recycled content, and I think the next panel is all folks in that category, so we'll maybe leave it to them, and I'll introduce Manuel Medrano. Manuel wears many hats. He's the president of the California RMDZ, the Recycling Market Development Zone Association. Unlike his predecessor, who literally wore many hats, just such an inside joke, but I saw Lao-Tzu on the line, so I think he would appreciate it. Manuel, in addition to being the RMDZ Zone Administrator President, he also works for the City of Chula Vista, running their solid waste program. He serves on the Recycling Commission with Heidi and myself, and he serves on the board of the California Resource Recovery Association with me. And there are few people who've taken their job quite as seriously in terms of, I'm not just managing materials, I need to look upstream and make sure all the incentives, make sure I turn off the faucet instead of just wiping up the spill. So that I'll turn it over to Manuel, and his panel is the doers, which is the alternative to the talkers that we had so far this morning. So people who are actually doing stuff.
Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you very much for that very nice introduction. And thank you for mentioning, I wear many hats. Steve Lotzi, he also wore a lot of hats. And we all remember those great Sox and the Red Sox too. Don't forget the Red Sox. So a little bit just about the RMDZ program and the association, which I head with a bunch of great group of people made up of administrators of the Recycling Market Development Zone Program, or RMDZ, which brings together recycling and economic development to fuel new industries, expand new ones, create jobs, and divert waste from landfills, which is extremely important, of course. The RMDZ program provides low-interest loans of up to $2 million, technical assistance, and marketing for businesses that can use materials from waste stream to manufacture new products. The program also offers assistance with the permitting processes to help find consistent secondary material feedstock supply, and also the product marketing itself. So for more information, please visit calrecycle.gov//RMDZ. That's calrecycle.gov/RMDZ to find out if your business is in a zone and how we could help. And just a couple of stats to date, the RMDZ program has loaned over $167 million and diverted over 4.7 million tons of waste from landfill disposal. This, along with other programs available through the Governor's Office of Economic Development, or GOBIZ, are here to help. So please help us spread the word throughout different organizations. Make sure that people know that this is available for businesses. So without further ado, I'd like to present our panel, which to start is we're joined by Paul Bennett, President and CEO of REXPO Industries, followed by Eric Nelson from Aquafil Carpet Recycling. And yes, we sat, Eric, myself, and a few others sat in the CARE group that was formed a couple of years ago. Octavio Vital from Green Impact Plastics, and Hendrik Dullinger who is the Vice President of Business Development for Pre-Zero USA. So I'll go ahead and get started with Paul, and we could hear your information.
Well, actually, it's Tom Beatty. Paul was kind enough to give me a few minutes of his time, and I'm just here to introduce Circulus into the California market. We're based in Modesto, California. If you can flip to the next slide. So Circulus is a Houston-based company. The first facility is going to be here in Modesto, California. It's under construction now. And our goal is to contribute and to improve in the domestic circularity of recyclable plastics. We're focused on the recycling of LDPE and LLDPE, both of which are under recycled in the U.S. domestic market. And a lot of that material currently, is really going export. The team that we've put together here at Circulus has over 50 years of recycling experience with the use of cutting edge technology and really introducing innovative processing techniques. We have folks on our team that have developed the largest MRFs in the country, probably 3 of the top 5. And, that is the COO of the company. And so, we're just trying to make a splash here with the LD and LL market. Obviously, at the end of the day, we want to ensure the safety of everyone on our team and deliver a premium quality finished product. So what we're doing is we're taking in post-commercial, post-consumer MRF bales, and a lot of MRF bales aren't even being developed today as the market kind of went south. A lot of these MRFs stopped producing them. And, we're taking in the low-grade plastic film bales that were typically going export. A lot of these bales were going into Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, India, and China before they banned it. Go ahead. Location, 4 facilities in various stages of development today. As you can see from the pictures there, the first facility is Modesto, Riverbank area. And you can see the water tank there that we have under roof to recirculate 80% of the water in the wash line. The facility is going to have the ability to recycle LD, LL, HD, and PP. Obviously, there will be a focus on the LD and LL, but there's a substantial opportunity in the HD and PP market that we are currently working on to retrofit the line. Our goal is to have 10 to 12 plants across the U.S. in the next 5 years, with 4 of them already being, 3 of them already being built today. The 4th one being developed. We're on track to meet that goal. The first location is 100% green hydroelectric power. We are a public benefit LLC, which kind of holds us to a little different standard than the typical LLC. The PB stands for the public benefits. So living wage and just more transparency overall in what we do and how we do it. You know, the facility here is a 76-year-old building, and we're actually utilizing a very good portion of that and just bringing it up to code with additional electric and other things that's needed for this facility. First facility is 44 million pounds of resin produced annually, and we're looking to be operational May 15th. And that's kind of the down and dirty with Circulus, and just looking forward to continuing letting everyone know what we're doing here in Riverbank.
Tom, thank you. Yeah, Tom, thank you very much. Appreciate it. The REXPO, I made this presentation probably about 10 years ago to Cal Recycle and thought it would be a real slam dunk from the standpoint of had so many people backing recycling. And one of the things that REXPO does is make slip sheets. And there's probably not a lot of people that know what slip sheets are, but everybody knows what a wood pallet is. And I thought, okay, this is just is going to be a slam dunk working with the state agencies in the goods that they buy from various vendors like Cisco and et cetera, to change them over to slip sheets and then start paying that agency money back, what we talk on the slide here, green to gold. So this is a little bit about REXPO and what we do. And when we came to Cal Recycle,
you had to do it right when Paul started talking too.
Am I on mute? Okay.
No, we could hear you, but we want to ask everybody on to please mute.
Yeah, I just muted him. Sorry.
Okay, you want me to start again?
No, it's fine. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah, just from the standpoint of those are the facts about REXPO. And so one of the exciting things is what Tom talked about. They are our new neighbor next to us. And that was our goal originally when we came to Riverbank, was to become vertically integrated from a cost standpoint and from a manufacturing standpoint. And we're excited about Circulus being there and hope that they can do what they say they do, because I visited their plant 3 weeks ago, and it is a massive project. And I hope that they do get started up in May of this year. So you want to go to the next slide? There we go. Go to the next slide. Okay. Well, one of the things, as you can see here on a slip sheet, is that fully 90% of our products are recyclable. It's probably the real catch is trying to get it back from our customers through 3PLs and et cetera. which we've done with some customers like Dell, Hewlett-Packard in the past. And we'd like to have this take off because it's a moneymaker both for the individual, the company, the Department of Education, whatever it is, of getting that back. Now, go to the next slide there, please. It's all about dollars. And a plastic slip sheet, as you can see right there, is much less expensive than wood pallets. We say when we converted Dell in their shipments of goods coming in from Asia, when they had their plants over here in the United States, they saved $10 million initially that first year by going to slip sheets, plastic slip sheets, as opposed to wood pallets. Next slide. So here's the sustainability thing. It's very, very self-explanatory. We use both post-consumer and post-industrial products. And one of the reasons that we moved to California was we were given the opportunity to get a grant there and a loan from Cal Recycle, which really got us accepted into that community. And so the next step was to get rid of the wood pallets, not against wood pallets per se, but from the standpoint of changing people's thought process of using slip sheets on their products and the manufacturing of their products and shipping it on slip sheets versus wood pallets. Here's a couple of pictures of Coors when we were located in Denver, Colorado before our manufacturing was, before we moved at the end of 2016 to Riverbank and set it up and going. Coors really taught us a lot about plastic slip sheets. They basically engineered it, and we got a contract with them back several years ago and really learned a lot from them in the manufacturing of plastic slip sheets. It seems simple, but because of their QC methods, it really helped us as a manufacturer to be accepted by major customers like Kohler, American Standard, etc. Here's your cost savings right here. You get more product, more business, store the product, etc. That's the pallets there versus the slip sheets. You got 1,000 slip sheets, you got about 25 wood pallets. So it's pretty self-explanatory from that standpoint. And we've been big in sustainable operations ever since we got into this business when I bought the company in 2000, and really have seen this recycling thing take off. Go ahead. And this is, again, just the post-consumer cycle that you see here that's in this whole system that we're trying to develop in California itself, and then the West Coast, and then globally. Okay. This is when we talked about this Green to Go program. We did this with Dell, picking up the slip sheets that they had when product was shipped over to Ireland, when they had a manufacturing facility there on their computers and monitors and etc. And so we collected it over there and then shipped it back to our plant in Denver and used it back to make plastic slip sheets. So it's 100% recyclable. This is some of the companies that we've worked with in the past, and it really got started with Home Depot many years ago when they came to us looking for a way to get rid of wood pallets. And we developed the slip sheet for them and started that process many years ago. In this whole thing, we have contracts with Kohler, American Standard, Unisource is now Verte. We've done business with Leprino Foods, Constellation, which is now Gallo, American Standard. And we're pleased with the progress we've made with these companies. We have contracts with them. And one of the things that we're really working on is the Green to Go program, getting back that from the 3PLs. So I guess that's the last slide there. So just as my comments are that I thank Cal Recycle very much so for the support that they've given to us over the last 10 years when we started getting the grants and the loans there, and being patient with us and helping us introduce REXPO to many companies there in California. Look forward to either your inquiries or your questions.
Thank you, Paul. I want to remind everybody, if you could please put your questions in the chat, but we're going to wait till the very end. We do have one question on there, and I promise I'll get to it, Heidi, but I wanted to first give a chance to the speakers to go forward and do their presentation. Then we'll follow all the questions. Yes, Doug, I forgot also to mention that I'm the Vice Chair of the California Product Stewardship Council. Thank you for the reminder. So next is Eric Nelson. Are you ready with your presentation?
I am. Good morning. I am currently disabled from sharing my screen, so if the host could make me a co-host, that'd be appreciated. Okay, let me try again. There we go.
It's coming up.
All right. You guys hear me okay and see me okay?
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Eric Nelson. I have been quite involved in the carpet stewardship program in California, really since the beginning. I actually helped write the very first stewardship plan that CARE wrote right after the bill was passed in the spring of 2011. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, but I can say that the state of carpet recycling in California is healthy. California has actually become, because of the law that's in place there, California has sort of become the center for the carpet recycling industry because of the subsidies and grant dollars that are provided. I'd like to talk about Aquafil today. We are an Italian-based company, actually publicly traded on the Milan Stock Exchange, about 3,000 employees, 16 plants in many different countries. We are really focused on nylon, increasingly recycled nylon from post-consumer sources. Our main markets are fiber for carpet, yarn for apparel, and the engineered plastic marketplace, which services many different product types. Nylon is a ubiquitous material, goes into many different plastic parts in the automobile industry and beyond. Our original recycling plant, one that we still run today, is in a lovely town called Ljubljana, which is in Slovenia, just to the east of Venice, for those of you like me that are a bit geographically challenged over in that area. And it takes post-consumer nylon and unzips it and makes caprolactam, which is the building block that is used to polymerize new nylon 6. Through the years, we have grown a bit tired of relying on others to supply this plant. And so we started thinking about ways to try to self-supply, to supply this recycling plant ourselves. And so how can we get more sources of post-consumer nylon to recycle in this plant? For a long time, we tried to ramp up our fishing net supply. So most fishing nets, with that, they're called ghost nets that are polluting our oceans, are made from nylon. And this provides a great feedstock for us for recycling. Increasingly, we started to turn our attention to the carpet industry, which is a great source of post-consumer nylon. In fact, in the U.S., every year there's 4 billion pounds of post-consumer carpet that goes into our landfills. And in the grand scheme of things, we don't recycle very much of it. Nationally, the rate is about 5%. If you take California out, the rate is more like 4% for the other 49 states. However, in California, we're above 20% now. And that is all due to AB 2398 and the subsequent cleanup bills that were passed, and all of the dollars in the form of subsidies and grants that go into the program. So in an effort to try to capture more of that carpet to self-supply our nylon recycling plant, we've opened 2 carpet recycling plants, one in Phoenix and one in Woodland, California, to hope capture as much of the post-consumer nylon carpet coming out of California that we can. Each of these plants has a capacity of 36 million pounds. And it really represented about, so far anyway, about a $25 million investment. I've got a real short video here that it's not really forwarding here. Let's see if this will play.
Do you know how carpet is made? Where the materials come from? Have you ever thought about what happens to carpet after its useful life? The materials are typically petroleum-based, and after its useful life, carpets are discarded to landfills. In fact, 4 billion pounds of carpet is discarded in landfill each year in the U.S., and only 5% of this carpet waste is recycled. Aquafil has established 2 carpet recycling plants, one in Phoenix, Arizona, and one in Woodland, California, to help tackle this waste problem. Each facility has the capacity to collect and recycle 36 million pounds of carpet each year. That's 25,000 square yards of carpet each day diverted from landfills. Carpets are made up of materials primarily based in oil-based plastics, which are recyclable. What makes carpet recycling challenging are the variety of materials used and the way they are assembled. At Aquafil, we have developed a proprietary process and technology that enables us to fully deconstruct the entire carpet and recycle all 3 components: the face fiber, the calcium carbonate, and the backing. There are 3 phases to our disassembly process. The process starts with the shredder where the carpet gets deconstructed. During this first phase, we remove as much calcium carbonate from the carpet as possible. Calcium carbonate is normally used to stabilize the carpet. Then, the focus of the second phase is to break the bonds among the different components or elements that constitute the carpet. The third phase is where finally the 2 fibers, nylon and polypropylene, are separated. In the end, the calcium carbonate will be reused in the cement industry, and the polypropylene will be recycled and used for engineering plastics. The pelletized nylon, instead, is packed into big bags for shipment to our Slovenian facility. This is where the EcoNil regeneration process takes place. Nylon waste from old carpets is regenerated together with other waste from all over the world, like fishing nets, textile scraps, and plastic components. Through a process called depolymerization, the nylon waste is regenerated into EcoNil nylon that has the same quality as nylon that is made from oil. EcoNil nylon is used by more than 1,000 brands all over the world for fashion and interiors textiles. Your next carpet could have a different story if you choose sustainable materials that are recycled and recyclable. But this can only happen when we start designing products with the end in mind.
So just to sort of emphasize a few points from the video, carpet's tough stuff. It's made to be durable. It's made to last for many, many years. And, you know, just now carpet manufacturers are starting to think about, you know, maybe we should try to think about making our products a little different, maybe easier to recycle. But as it stands today, the post-consumer carpet that we get back is very difficult. It's multiple materials that are put together sort of in a very durable mishmashed format, and trying to find the right technology to separate those materials in as clean a way as possible. That's really the trick. And we feel like we have a really good technology to recover the face fiber, the backing fiber, and the calcium carbonate, which is essentially limestone, which is used as filler in the latex. And all three of those products can find great new uses. The nylon, as it said in the video, goes back to us to be recycled into caprolactam and then eventually into new fibers for apparel and carpets. The polypropylene is a very popular material for the engineered plastics market. And then calcium carbonate is going into filler application in the cement industry. Just a few shots to end up here with our plants in Phoenix and Woodland. This is our feedstock as it comes in, bales of post-consumer carpet that's have already been sorted by fiber type. And again, this represents about 25,000 square yards each day, which if you do the math is about 225,000 square feet. So that's a lot of carpet capacity that we have now to be recycled. And I believe I'll stop it there, Manuel. If we're saving questions for the end, I'll pass the baton off.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, I'd like to remind everybody we're holding the questions to the end. And I'd like to ask speakers that if you see a question there addressed to you, if you don't mind, we could hold the answers towards the end so we could have some discussion points on there as well. So next speaker, we have Octavio Vital from Green Impact Plastics, and Hendrik Tullinger will be joining him as well. So I'll have Octavio start with this presentation. Go ahead, Octavio.
Thank you all. Good morning. Well, our company specifically tackles thermoform recycling. Me and my brother, we've been recycling bottles for now 16 years. Well, something like 13 years, and then the last 3 years on thermoforms. Company name is Green Impact Plastics, and we set up shop in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, right on the border with El Paso, Texas. And for a number of reasons, bottles, even though it's the same polymer as thermoform, they cannot be recycled together. And we are a member of NAPCOR, which, you know, really pushes PET as one of the most recycled polymers out there. And we just joined the US Plastic Pact, and we're also members of the APR. And we actively serve in the PET technical committee. But I want to discuss some of these reasons why the thermoforms need to be recycled separate from bottles. You know, they have a different bulk density when you ground them at the same size. You got to pre-treat the labels differently, as most of the bottle labels have plastic labels. Thermoforms have paper labels, even though now they're moving into plastic labels to make it more recycle friendly. There's an excessive pulping due to paper labels. The process parameters to avoid sharing and losing material through fines need to be adjusted. There needs to be chemical adjustments to address the adhesives and the pressure sensitive labels. Illustration needs to be completely different as bottles as well, and you got to remove all those fines in order to avoid black specks in your new sheet. Near infrared sortation, not every technology out there can actually support thermoform recycling. And there's going to be intrinsic viscosity differences that limit solid stating capabilities between one and another. So there is a lot of reasons to separate bottles from thermoforms. Also, running a thermoform bale through a traditional bottle recycling line will generate at least 50% yield loss between, loose thermoforms in the front end and then fines during the washing process. That's why me and my brother, we decided to re-engineer the facility in Juarez just to run thermoforms. You all have seen this stats. Unfortunately, as you see in the picture, thermoforms sink due to their specific density. So what we see in the ocean in the top is just the tip of the iceberg. All of our thermoforms will be in the bottom of the ocean. That snapshot on the right corner and down, David Dalloway, he was featured on the Plastic Wars video 2020, and just a few days ago in the Weekend Today with John Oliver. He's in the he's being asked in a shelf with thermoforms, is this packaging recycled? And he says, absolutely not in this state. And Green Impact is committed to change that perception. Since that Weekend Tonight video, since that aired, we had 3 different groups out of Oregon saying, we want to send you thermoforms, Octavio. These are some of our customers and examples of what you can achieve with recycled thermoform. On the left side, there's a salad bowl made with 100% post-consumer thermoform content. In the middle, there's a strawberry 1-pounder made with 30% post-consumer thermoform content. And we are supplying all of these companies today with thermoform clean wash flake to be put mainly into strawberry and salad containers. These are pilot plan, Ciudad Juarez. It's in my back as well. The flake is our finished product. We produce food grade flake. We began the operation in May 2019. We have a max capacity of 20 million pounds. It was designed to process bales of 100% thermoforms, which is a big challenge. It produces thermoform clean wash flake suitable for direct food contact. It's only located 9 miles from the border, and it's processed over 6 million pounds today and sold to major packaging manufacturers. We're looking to establish a second facility in Vernon, California, and maybe a third one in Texas if legislation can help us unlock supply. As I told you, our process generates some fines. We found a solution to take our facility to zero waste. It's called liquid state polycondensation, and we'll be able to make a pellet soon that is suitable for non-food, not food grade containers or fibers. Where we see policy challenges in California? Well, since we started, the supply of thermoform bales still remains the same, even though there's a strong market demand. Commingle rate incentivizes the MRFs to locate thermoforms in the B-grade bales. And the thermoforms that actually end in the bottle bales will be sorted out at the reclaiming front end and sold to export market as a mixed bale. And I'll show you some pictures after. 240 million pounds a year could potentially be repurposed into new containers only in California, but the scrap value of around 10 cents is not incentive enough for MRFs to keep commingling in B-grade bales where they're getting around 60 cents. So you see, this is a B-grade bale, not telling which MRF it's coming from, but you can see the amount of thermoforms in there. When you open it up, it's going to have way more. And this is a reject bale coming out of the opticals and then into a baler, goes into a bunker with all the stuff that was rejected in the front end at a bottle reclaimer. And you can see all those thermoforms in there. because the bottle-to-bottle industry doesn't want thermoforms in their bottle stream. There it is. Thermoforms will end up being exported if they can, or landfilled, or God knows where. PRCC, Plastic Recycling Corporation of California, made a bale study last year. We helped get that organized, and the PET bale sort study actually revealed that there is an astonishing amount of thermoforms in those bales. Some of the MRFs that were chosen showed up to 30% thermoforms in a bottle bale, and those 30% thermoforms will be sorted out at a bottle reclaiming facility and will never get to us. Usually there were some other alternatives, a secondary MRF where these materials were separated. Unfortunately, they had to shut down also beginning of this year, and no longer can we have access to those thermoforms. I can share with you the full bale study from PRCC. It's a whole bunch of numbers. Got the permission to share it with you guys. I'll upload it into the chat box. But the curbside program get paid a commingled rate of 59.79% CRB. This is an annual CRB overpayment of $7.5 million. This is a lot of money that is going into containers that get thrown away. So the PRCC has now generated a completely different bale spec. They have their traditional grade A, their B grade, and a B grade with thermoforms, and now a thermoform, because they're encouraging the MRFs to do a thermoform only bale. But still, that volume remains the same as when we started working with them. AB 1454, Blumen O'Donnell, the plastic quality incentive payments. This incentive will substantially free PET thermoforms out of the bottle bales, and this is a great bill that will help Green Impact Plastics at least get those thermoforms out of the bottle stream and now figure out a way to put it into a thermoform bale. This shows that thermoform recycling is a perfect synergy to bottle recycling, and it will decontaminate the stream and allow better bottle reclaiming facilities operate smoother and more profitable operations. Similar to, I come from Mexico, and in Mexico, most bottle reclaimers, they don't get thermoforms, they get just PET bottles, and they run more profitable operations because they don't have to deal with all these contaminants coming into their systems. AB 478 is a bill that we've been, along with a group of stakeholders, trying to get the author to get the full context of what we need. It promotes the use of thermoform clean wash flake in new PET thermoform containers. It will ensure a steady end market for the post-consumer thermoform bales. Will incentivize policy due to decouple bottles from thermoforms. And brand owners that use thermoform containers will have to engage in recovery initiatives. We all know the Coca-Cola initiative, Every Bottle Back. We don't see why they couldn't be initiatives like Every Thermoform Back. The language on the bill states the percentages and the dates to hit the threshold on thermoform clean wash flake percentage on those thermoform containers. The flake that we're producing today shows that it's technically viable to get there if we just get the supply, and we can turn it into a flake that packaging manufacturers can use. The big questions will the MRF sort out the thermoforms and then send it into a mixed plastic bale that ends up in the export market? Will they have the space to sort out the thermoforms? Or will the scrap value be enough for them to get on board and make the required retrofits? These are very expensive retrofits, opticals, robots that they need to put in place. And I don't think truly that 10 cents will move the needle for them. Should there be a deposit on thermoforms? Maybe, I don't know. But absolutely will help if we remove all other non-recyclables from the stream and give the MRFs a better chance to actually sort out what's recyclable and put it into end markets that are currently today demanding the materials. So we are strong supporters of SB 343. Let's make recyclable containers recycled, and what's not recyclable, let's take it to where it belongs. Here's my contact information. And I'll let some time for questions.
Thank you, Octavio. We're going to hold off for questions towards the end. Hendrik Dillinger, is your presentation ready?
Yes, but you need to add me as a co-host as well. I can't access it right now.
That's happening right now. And we're still hearing a little bit of background noise, so if I please remind everybody to mute.
And well, I think I've muted everybody. So I wasn't sure where that little bit of background noise is coming from. So I'm sorry about that.
All right, so let's get Hendrik's presentation up if we can.
Okay.
Does Hendrik have
Still doesn't work out for me. It says screen sharing disabled.
Frank or Heidi, can you make him presenter?
Frank, I'm not sure how you're elevating people to, let me double check and see if I can.
He's a co-host now, so you should be able to now, Hendrik.
Yep. Works, you should see it now.
You can see it now.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. 1 second.
Lisa Webb, can you please mute yourself?
Okay. So good morning from Oroville, California. My name is Hendrik Dillinger. I'm the VP of Business Development at PreZero US. And this presentation is a small introduction to our activities here in the United States. This first slide here shows you our global footprint. PreZero is part of the Schwarz Group, privately held German retail group. It includes the grocery retailers Lidl and Kaufland. Lidl is present in over 30 European countries. Kaufland is, has a more focus on the Eastern European countries with a big footprint in Germany as well. And PreZero is present in 8 countries in the sustainability arm of the Schwarz Group. Mr. Schwarz started his retail empire in the 70s, and with growing distribution centers all across Europe and a lot of private label brands, we also saw the need of internalizing some of the production efforts into our group. So we started building ice cream factories, bakery factories, bottle factories. We're today Europe's biggest mineral water bottling company and have an in-house bottle-to-bottle PET recycling process in place as well. And that PET plant that we built in Germany about 15 years ago kicked off the PreZero how it is today. But really we're just in the last 3 to 4 years on a big growth path. We started in around 2017, 2018, where Mr. Schwarz really saw sustainability as the next big thing and said, now my goal is, before I completely retire, to close the loop, to have production, to have retail, and to have end-of-life management within our organization. And Lidl opened up shop on the East Coast in 2017. I was involved in the opening from the waste and recycling perspective back then. We looked for different opportunities to divert our materials on the retail end, and we realized the big potential in the market and the discussions that are going on around sustainability. So when the idea of becoming a more operational waste management and recycling company was thrown around at the headquarters, we decided to enter the US market as well. And what better place is out there for recycling than California? We saw, the AB 1826 coming for the organic waste recycling. We saw the SB 270 coming for recycling content in plastic bags. So those are just two of the bills that really drove our decision for California. At the end of the day, we're now, as Pre-Zero, present in 8 countries, including the US, with over 130 sites and 4,800 employees. We're not quite as large in the US, but as I mentioned, the reasons for settling in California was really the progressive legislation. I have a couple of bills that I just mentioned on this slide here as well, including, of course, the big one, SB 1383, to get to 75% recycling rate. So we feel good about that, and are focusing now on 2 locations, mainly in California. We have our headquarters in the Los Angeles area. We acquired what we call an environmental compass, a 300,000 square foot area consisting of 3 warehouses. One warehouse, the largest one with about 150,000 square foot, is dedicated for our organics recycling project, which we're going to be announcing a little bit later down the line. The second building, 120,000 square foot, is in use today for our LDPE closed loop solutions. We're doing similar to the colleagues at Circulus, LDPE and LLDPE recycling in that facility. And we just recently added another company to our family up here in Oroville, where I'm at today, Roplast Industries, manufacturer of reusable shopping bags compliant with the SB 270 legislation in California. And another great addition to our portfolio, which allows certain customers that we have, big retail customers, to provide a true closed loop solution for them. We joined the plastic recycling space together with a local partner here. The local partner had a facility out in Westminster, South Carolina. So similar setup that we are introducing down in Southern California, we also bring to life in Westminster, South Carolina. Outside of the LDPE space, we're also focusing on mixed rigid plastic processing, since this was a category when we first looked into the plastic recycling space. After the China National thought, we saw that a lot of this material is going back to landfill. So it was important for us to focus on a category like that, really introduce a state-of-the-art sorting system around it, and make sure that all valuable recycling categories, polymers in there, in the name of HDPE and PP, are recovered from that process. This shows our 2 pillars again. As I mentioned on the previous slide, we're focusing on organic waste and plastic waste, since we see 2 tremendous growth markets in it. We're all about closing the loop. So our goal as a retailer, as you can imagine, is always bringing the products back on shelf. With the organic waste we're doing, other than some other technology out there, we're trying to, we call our process nutrient recycling. So we try to keep the nutrients and the organic food waste alive, and we'll feed animals with it. Byproducts include soil fertilizer that will go on farms, and hence have a contribution to new fruits and vegetables ending up on the shelves. So that's our organic cycle. And then on the plastic side, very similar. Our facilities are set up to produce the highest quality out of the post-consumer feedstock that we're collecting to go back into actual consumer products. We don't want to downcycle it in any lower value application. We would like to bring it into a state where you can really introduce it back into consumer products. Some examples are out here. With the LDPE, that process is certainly in place. We're going into reusable shopping bags, into consumer good products such as diaper wraps, paper towels, and so on. On the MRP side, there are a lot of black polymers in the mix as well that were getting lost in the past. So for us, it was important to also introduce sorting technologies that can capture those black HDPE and PP buckets that are in the mix. Hence, we're going into a product that is limited in terms of the color that we're reintroducing to the market. But our second iteration will also already go into a deeper color sort to allow these pellets that we're producing to go in even more applications, including again consumer goods in the future. What do we think needs to happen to get the recycling rate up? We think it takes a cross-industry collaboration from the manufacturer to the MRF to the recycler to the consumer brands. Everyone needs to be committed to to make recycling happening. We see some weak links. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone in this chain is trying to protect their own investment and trying to run a profitable business at the end of the day. Some of the legislation that's been introduced around extended producer responsibility can certainly help. And then there's a lot of good material out there that can be reclaimed with the proper processes, including the LD, HD, and PP that we're focusing on. And we're then able on the recycler side to lead them through a process and making them ready for new applications in the circular economy. This is, to wrap it up, our overall vision. We believe the greatest leverage as a recycling company you have when you are present along the whole supply chain. So we would like to become eventually a waste management company that is engaged in collection, in sortation of the material with state-of-the-art sorting facilities, create resins in facilities such as the one that we're introducing in California, and something that we're also going to be expanding on here in the Oroville, Northern California area. And then eventually bring those new raw materials back into new products that we'll see on the shelves, whether that's in our own stores or whether that's in other retail stores across the country. And that's it outside and on PreZero.
Thank you very much, Hendrik. Interesting presentation. With that, we could move on to questions for all of our speakers, and I'll start with the very first one that came in, which I see on the chat from Heidi, to our first speaker, Tom. Can you please share where do you get your feedstock for your operation? Tom, are you still on the line? Maybe we could come back to that.
Manuel, let me, since he was part of our presentation, at the plant there in Riverbank, most of it was coming from waste management in the bales that were coming in there. They expect probably 100 loads a month out of there. That's where it was coming from.
Thank you. And thank you for staying, for answering that, Paul. The next question is also for you about the use of the slip sheets when you have multiple containers stacked. How does one pick up a load?
My assumption was that everybody knew what a forklift is. And on that forklift, the company called Cascade Corporation developed what is called a push-pull unit. And that attaches to the forklift. Cascade is owned by Toyota now. It was bought out about 6 years ago. Cascade is located up in Portland, Oregon, where they manufacture the push-pull unit that goes on there. Major corporations like Walmart, Dell, et cetera, like that, know they have push-pull units in their 3PL organizations or their warehouses themselves.
So Paul, I'm familiar with the push-pull units, but when you're trying to pick something off of something underneath it, you don't want to push it in the floor. So how do you pick it if you don't have a box grabber?
The slip sheet's on there. So,
yeah, but that doesn't allow you to pick it up.
Okay. The slip sheet, basically look at yourself having a tablecloth, and then dishes on top of that tablecloth. If you pull the tablecloth, the dishes move. Okay, what supports it? The table. So the same principle is with a push-pull unit. It's forks, like the forks on a push-pull unit, but they're flat. And so they easily have a grabber that comes out and grabs the slip sheet, and then with the load on the slip sheet, pulls it on and then pulls it off.
Thank you.
Great.
I'd be more than happy to send you a bunch of information on that. If you put my email in there, that I just send me an email and I'll send out all the filming of it, of what we did with Dell over in Nashville and Austin.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, his Paul's email and cell phone is on the chat. Next question is for Eric. Eric, are area rugs recyclable?
Yeah, hi, thanks for the question. Area rugs, much like wall-to-wall carpet, come in a variety of different fiber types. Almost all the fiber types are recyclable. The only one that really doesn't have a home right now is wool. However, wool is biodegradable. So if it does end up in a landfill, it will biodegrade. If you have an area rug or if you have carpet or anything you'd like to be recycled, just hop on either the Cal Recycle website or the CARE website, which is carpetrecovery.org. And you'll see a list of all of the different public and private collection sites throughout the state of California. Just pick the one that is closest to you and you can take it yourself.
Eric, this is Heidi. I would add, though, that a lot of carpets are not labeled by fiber, so people really can't sort them, which is a big problem, especially the area rugs. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily suggesting that. I would say if you have something to be recycled, go ahead and take it to one of the collection sites, because from there it will go to a qualified sorter, collector sorter, who has the technology to sort based on fiber type. Thanks.
Thank you. Got two questions for Octavio. Octavio, can you discuss whether food residue in recycled thermoforms is a problem?
Not at all. Actually, the FBA states that in order for you to create a food grade flake, you got to start by food grade containers. So we expect food waste on them.
Great. And then the next question also for you, Octavio. Can you clarify that PET bottle stock is being used to manufacture recycled content thermoform containers?
Every day and for many years, thermoform containers have been the savior, especially for the bottle program in California for many years. And now that the bottling companies want all their bottles back, they're basically abandoning the packaging thermoforming guys, because for many years they were their heroes. Now, they need some help. And they're actually helping by taking those thermoforms out of the bottle stream. So the beverage industry, for all I know, are very supportive of thermoform recycling. They don't want those thermoforms in the bottle stream.
Thank you. Next question is for Hendrik. Hendrik, given your position across the retail supply chain and Lidl's expansion in the U.S., has the Schwartz Group gone involved in food waste prevention and the U.S. Plastics Pact for eliminating and preventing unnecessary food waste and packaging?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So PreZero is also an internal consulting partner for our retail chains, and one thing we do across all countries is look at total waste generation. So we help our retail chains in preventing as much food waste as possible. So very similar to the APR food hierarchy. Our first goal is always preventing food waste and see what we can donate, and then we go into different processing technologies. Again, then from our perspective, highest and best use is important. The more nutrients you can prevent, the better it is. But yeah, absolutely. Whether that's through smart, cooling technologies or ordering systems, we're experimenting with all of that to continue reducing our food waste footprint. And on the U.S. Plastic Pact, yes, we are a founding member of the U.S. Plastic Pact, and in some countries we're involved on the retail side and on the PreZero side. Here in the U.S., we're currently joined as PreZero US, but have regular checkups with our team at Lidl US and make sure that that we're all aligned as a group in our representation.
Thank you. And I do have to comment that in early 2020 in January, I was fortunate enough to be invited by the Swedish government to visit some of their waste facilities in their country. They shop at a Lidl store, and I was really taken aback on how much packaging that store and those stores had. Understanding that there's different supply chains, but I'm hoping that as Lidl expands in this country, that that over packaging of items and products doesn't continue. But thank you for clarifying that. Next question is for REXPO. Is it hard to find, and for Paul, is it hard to find feedstock for your slip sheets?
Not in the past, no. Since the disaster down in the Gulf of Mexico, yes. Yes. Yeah, we have mainly our suppliers are in California and up in Oregon and in Canada. But it's been a tight market right now, and it'll eventually get adjusted back. But right now it is tough to find the right feedstock for us. And we have a really broad specification for the high-density polyethylene.
Follow-up question for you, Paul, from myself. Is there anything you're doing to encourage the feedstock, working with local MRFs or with MRFs throughout the state?
Yes, we visited several. I don't know if you remember a gentleman by the name of Stan Kezar. He used to be in operations for Taco and set up about 3 plants there in California. We've retained him to go out and to work with various smaller processors in deriving HMW and HDPE feedstock for us.
Thank you. Next question is for Eric. Eric, how much capacity do you have, and are you getting enough carpet for feedstock?
Good question. 36 million pounds annually for each plant. So, roughly 70 million pounds of input is what we need to fill up both of our plants. Quite frankly, we are not getting enough feedstock. So the California program as a whole we collect, between 25 and 30%. So there's, the lowest hanging fruit is being collected. But the entire industry, CARE, and all of us who are involved in the industry are trying to figure out, how to get that next big chunk of material to help feed our plants. So that's job number one for the next year.
Thank you. Frank, the second part of your question here for Eric, you're asking about the, if I read this correctly, the carcass, is it recyclable? What did you mean by that?
Yeah, at the bottom of the carpet, is it, what do you do with it?
Yeah, so in the presentation, I referred to it as the polypropylene backing. And so really the backing is made up of a woven polypropylene sort of scrim, as well as the latex and calcium carbonate mix. And so that calcium carbonate is recycled as filler into the cement industry, and the polypropylene ends up back into the engineered plastics business.
Great, thank you. Next question is for Hendrik. On your organic waste project, can you take food and yard waste to process to the feedstock preparation?
We currently do not take yard waste, so our process is focused on food waste only. But as a byproduct of our process, we will generate nitrogen-rich fertilizers, and that makes a lot of sense then to mix in with yard waste as well. So we're also actively in the process. Again, the organic project is a little bit further out. I would like to introduce that later on, with a similar group. But part of our strategy is definitely also to build a compost site and help out with the yard waste generation as well. And if I can add on one thing to the last question that I had. I didn't touch on packaging. I wanted to mention that we do have what we call a reset plastic strategy internally. So we're evaluating every kind of packaging we have, trying to uniform it, eliminate certain kinds of packaging, and what's still being generated then over pre-zero again, recycle. So that's also a global effort that's going on in the company.
Thank you. And I'd like to also mention that prior to pre-zero taking over, myself and my colleague from the County of San Diego, Mike Wunsidler, we actually visited a pilot project and laboratory there in the Jurupa Valley, or nearby, sorry, but in Southern California in the eastern part. Very interesting with the soldier flies, the black soldier flies, and how they were processing some of the organic waste. So really looking forward to seeing what the future holds for that project. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eric, thank you very much for also putting the link to the YouTube video, the one you had shown. Another question on carpet. Can you take soil carpet from pets? And on the back, let me see if I can read this correctly. Can you take soil carpet from pets on the backing to recycle?
Yeah, listen, when you collect and recycle old carpet, you see a little bit of everything. I can tell you from experience, from appliances to car parts to everything else that gets rolled in that carpet. I will say wet carpet is not recyclable. So we do everything we can to keep it out of the rain. Even though it doesn't rain much in California, when it does, we have to make sure that stuff stays dry. But a few pet stains really doesn't bother us that much. It just comes out in the process.
And I think that's one of the issues too, right? When buildings are being torn down, demolition occurs. Carpets sometimes are used as, I guess, as a way to hold a lot of this material, and that usually tends to contaminate.
Yeah,
but,
that's one of our biggest problems, especially in the commercial market. Really, carpet needs to be taken out first in order to sort of preserve as much cleanliness as possible in a post-consumer material. But so often we see carpet just being used to gather up all of the drywall and everything else, and that becomes very, very, very problematic for us.
Thank you. And the next is a question for all the speakers, and we'll go one by one are you working with local chambers of commerce to get your services and products out to the local community? So we could start with Paul.
Yes, we work with Modesto, Chambers of Commerce, and also Opportunity Stanislaus, and also Stockton Chamber of Commerce through the Green Team. Yep.
Eric, how about you?
No, we really haven't taken that route yet. You know, we are sort of an ingredient to the final product if you talk about carpet or apparel. So if anybody has any suggestions in this area for us to maybe promote what we're doing and promote the finished products, I would be all ears.
And I may add for feedstock, you certainly need assistance with local cities and counties to hopefully send some stuff to facilities, which is kind of what's holding us back with carpet, right? So I would suggest that if you are a representative of a local jurisdiction or even with chambers of commerce, keep an eye out for carpet installers or carpet facilities, retail facilities. Usually the installers go back to pick up their carpet from there. So they will be perfect sites to collect carpet and have it hauled away to facilities.
Absolutely.
No. How about Hendrik? I'm working with local chambers of commerce.
We have talked to local chambers of commerce, but for a different reason, not really to find homes for our product, but that's an excellent suggestion. So thank you.
And Octavio, are you reaching out to folks in California and other states?
No, we basically sell raw material feedstock for all the packaging manufacturers, and most, well, I could say most of them are in California, and we're basically sold out. We need more feedstock to keep going.
Great. Thank you very much.
And can I say something about the chambers?
Sure, go ahead.
I would highly encourage all the recyclers and the folks to join chambers and try to help educate them about the system, because some of our greatest champions are chambers, and some of the folks that oppose a lot of what we try to do are chambers. So it would be very helpful actually to get more of you involved in chambers and educating them about the business side of our industry, and that we do need to work together to solve these problems. We can't have it be an us and them sort of thing. We have to all work together. If we're going to close the loop on the material, we have to close the loop on the conversation. So I would encourage everyone to join some chambers and be active with them.
Thank you. Thank you. Great points. Yeah, that's certainly the case. So next question is also for all panelists. And let's see, it's a pretty long one, Steve, but let's see if we could get it. Producers and packagers using virgin plastics are often rightly criticized for impacts on their products on the environment, whereas the independent users of post-consumer plastic on the panel are taking risks to solve the problem. Can any of you comment on your relationship to the virgin plastic industry, and your messaging to the public about the efforts to be part of the solution? Can we start with how about Octavio?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. So are you, let's see, where it's, here you go. So since virgin plastic or plastics are often rightly criticized for impacts, can you comment on the relationship to the virgin plastic industry and your messaging to the public about your efforts?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, virgin plastics is not our enemy. That's where we come from. You know, recycling could not come without virgin plastics. And whoever tells you that one bottle can go back into another bottle, that is absolutely not true. You know, you require some virgin because when you recycle these bottles, you're only going to recover, let's say, 70% of the bottle, and you need to fill it out with 30% virgin. So the virgin market still will grow because population keeps growing. and we're going to need more virgin plastic, but they also know that we are a synergy to what they're doing because they can't be dumping more and more plastic without it being recycled. And that's why companies like Indorama, DAC, Far Eastern have invested heavily into PET recycling, and they're taking big challenges to make sure the products that they're putting out on the streets or the resin gets back recycled and sometimes put into their new feedstocks at a percentage, ready to go to bottling companies. We have a great synergy with the virgin resin manufacturers, at least in my world.
Great. Paul, can you give us some insight on this? Some of your messaging to the public about your efforts?
Yeah, we work with people like Dairy Farmers of America and also Leprino and people like that. And we emphasize that we want to sell strictly recycled HDPE and the slip sheet. Some of them want virgin plastic just from an odor standpoint, but the progression of technology in the reprocessing of plastic is absolutely phenomenal. Taking a look at what Circulus is doing next door to us, they have from Europe the state-of-the-art equipment that takes out odor in the pellets that they make. And so that's one way that we look at not using virgin, but using strictly recycled if we can in food packaging.
Great. Hendrik, can you give us some insight on this, the relationship between the virgin plastic industry and the messaging to the public?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, we definitely see an increased interest in the recycling space, especially on the LL and LDPE side. You've seen over the past months some larger announcements between partnerships of recyclers and virgin companies. For example, Avantgarde and Innovative in Dow in Texas, or recently Revolution Plastics and Nova Chemicals. So there is some increased interest, but yeah, I think it's more driven by the consumer. The consumer requires more recycled content in the product. So it's more of a push than a pull is what I'm seeing there with the virgin producers.
Great, thank you. This is a pretty provocative question, so I want to give enough time for the rest of the questions that are still on the chat, because here comes another pretty provocative one. This one I would say is for Octavio. So will banning thermoforms from recycling bins harm the potential for more recycling?
So banning thermoforms from recycling bins
harm the potential for more recycling?
Absolutely. I mean, PET is the most recycled resin out there, period. Bottles have shown it. Thermoforms have a chance. If you ban it from the blue bin, guess what? We went back to square -2. Because if they won't even get to the bottle stream, you will clean the bottle stream, you will absolutely recover more bottles. But the thermoforms, they're gone. And there's 250 million pounds, 240 million pounds in California alone, and 1.5 billion pounds in the US alone every year being discarded. So that is a lot of volume, and it's going, like I showed you at the beginning of my presentation, directly to the bottom of the ocean. Because if we put it in a mixed bottle bale, God knows what they're going to do with it.
Thank you for that. Next question, it's for Eric. Eric, so many landfills tell folks that dirty or stained carpet cannot be recycled, so it lands in the landfill. Plus, most landfills do not take area rugs to be recycled. Do we need to change the messaging? We need to change the messaging, please, pretty please, he's saying. So.
Unfortunately, most of the landfills in California are not recycling any carpet or area rugs. And that's one of, when I spoke about the next fruit, after the low-hanging fruit now has been captured as far as collecting old carpet. Going to the landfills and those who operate the landfills is one of the big efforts that we as an industry need to take, and getting the landfills to sort out the carpet before it goes in the hole is something that we need to figure out how to do, for sure.
Well, I can add to that too. This is Heidi, that the recommendation has been for years to actually incentivize the facilities to keep it clean and dry by giving them some compensation for that work, since there is a visible fee on carpet, and that hasn't happened yet in the stewardship program.
Right.
So they have no financial reason to do it.
That's right.
So I have a question for Octavio. You mentioned in your presentation that bottle-to-bottle recyclers could make a difference, but is there any solutions to, and you did mention perhaps a deposit system. So the question really is, how would you envision a deposit system for thermoforms?
Oh, if there's an incentive to put the thermoforms in a different bin or a different place or just a different bale, first of all, it won't end up in the bottle bales. That means we will not see them in the mixed bottle bales that the bottle reclaimers make. So we are absolutely recovering a lot of thermoforms just by doing that. Without an incentive, I don't know how we're gonna incentivize people to, send that thermoform back into a different container, or a MRF invest in, $300,000 retrofit to sort out thermoforms.
And that was a follow-up question on retrofitting MRFs, at least in California. It's like you said in your presentation, it does require quite a bit of investment. Do you see any solution to that as well? And perhaps manufacturers could assist with that?
Yes, I encourage everybody to reach out to the recycling partnership. We have a great relationship with them. There's some grant opportunities with them. RSS is doing some pilot programs for thermoform recovery. It's being bankrolled by a whole bunch of associations and people that want to see thermoforms recovered. So there are some funding opportunities. But long term, there's definitely going to need some capital investment from, the system. And if you see the amount of money that's being, just on the commingle rate being dumped into non-CRB containers, I see a good opportunity of taking some of that money in there to clean the stream.
Do you have perhaps an estimate of the average cost for a MRF to retrofit to start separating thermoforms?
From every MRF that I've seen in California, I can tell you no MRF is made equal. And depending on the space, the bunkers, some require minimum investment, some require large investment. Because as you know, California also is constrained on space.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I'm taking a lot of liberties here as moderator, but I wanted to ask another question to Hendrik. On your presentation, you mentioned your LDPE and MRP. You showed the products that are being developed, but I noticed that, excuse me, some of those products perhaps might not be accepted in recycling programs. So what's happening to the circularity process of those? If you're making a car bumper from MRP, that car bumper might not be recycled in local programs. So is there anything that your company is doing to alleviate that? You're muted, Hendrik.
Yeah, our priority is, like I said, to try to get our products in highest and best use. So I think a lot of the products that we do have in the mix allow for circularity, but there are, I agree with you. There are certain products also in there where that makes that challenging. So we're trying to build our market, develop, in every direction we can. So I thought the hint on the Chamber of Commerce was very helpful, as we're still trying to build markets. And I think there's also home for the products that we develop in consumer goods. Now, I said, with the MRP, we're targeting a category that is highly contaminated. You have a lot of black polymers in there as well. Hence, it's making it challenging to find fitting homes for all of these polymers. But at the end of the day, if the consumer goods companies are getting a little bit more flexible, also in colors, I think there's a great opportunity for these products as well. So we're doing a lot of convincing and trying to, like other companies did in the past, trying to run some campaigns with products and see if the bottle maybe doesn't have to be white, but it can have some shades of gray. So those kind of things is what we're trying. But then for future iteration, as I mentioned, we're going to invest in more technology as well that allows us to go in multiple colors and open up greater markets that way for us.
Thank you for that answer. Frank, I wanted to call time. Are we doing good? Is Director Machi Wagner available, or?
She's not online yet. I will give you hey, Manuel, the director's online, signed.
Oh, she is? Okay.
No, she isn't yet, but I will give you that when time comes.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to take this time, a little bit of time, a few moments in this presentation to commemorate the life of Cesar Chavez, who was born today in 1927 in Yuma, Arizona. He went on to co-found the National Farm Workers Association in 1962, which then became the first farm workers union in the U.S. So this virtual event is actually originating in from Stockton in the San Joaquin Valley, which is the richest, most productive agricultural region in the world. So please take time today and take a moment to reflect on the plight of America's farm worker. Next time you enjoy the great agricultural bounties that this land provides for us. So thank you very much for allowing me to mention this. And again, thank you very much to the presenters today. There is a lot of follow-up if you want. There's questions on here. And if you have any additional questions, there's some of the contacts on the chat, and I see that Director Machi Wagner. I hope I didn't mispronounce your name, but I'll hand it over to Heidi for the introduction. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Manuel. Great panel. I'm learning a lot. It's great to see everybody, and it's so great to have our new CalRecycle director, Maki Wagner, here with us today. Before she was appointed by Gavin Newsom, our governor, in December of this year, she served as the Deputy Legislative Secretary in the Office of the Governor in 2019. And before that, she worked as the Chief Consultant for the Senate Committee on Environmental Quality from 2009 to 2018. So I've worked with Rachel for many years. I have seen how professional and thoughtful she is. She understands the law in this field very, very well, better than almost anyone. And she's passionate about this work. I couldn't have been happier to hear that she got this appointment, and I'm really proud to introduce her today and really thankful that she was willing to join us, as busy as she is. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Director Wagner for her presentation, and we'll take questions. You can just put them in the chat as she talks, and at the end we can go ahead and have a conversation. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Heidi, and thank you for that warm introduction. It is such a pleasure to spend time with Heidi and then with all of you. I wish we could be in person today. I am starting, as I'm sure most of you are, to get fatigued on the Zoom platform, but it is so wonderful to have the opportunity to speak with all of you today, and I'm hoping we can make this more of a conversation than me just speaking at you. I also, thank you, Manuel. I want to say a very happy Cesar Chavez Day to all of you, and appreciate the moment that Manuel took to commemorate Cesar Chavez's contributions to the state of California and his leadership, not only in Stockton and the San Joaquin Valley, but statewide, and the importance of that. And I think that I can't think of any better way for me to commemorate his contribution than to be speaking with all of you today about how do we move forward as the state of California in this historic time that we're in a positive way, and to do what the president is calling upon us to do and build back better. That is very much in the spirit of Cesar Chavez and his entire movement of making California and the entire country and world a better place. So just thank you again for having me today. This is an incredible honor. The Green Team San Joaquin is well known in CalRecycle for the incredible work and thinking that you all do. And so it is an incredible honor for me to be here with you today. As you all very well know, and is now the daily goal of mine, we have a waste problem not only in California, but globally. We are not recycling at the rates we should be recycling. We are not reducing our source or our waste at the rates that we should be, at the level that we're able to do. And right now, as we are recovering from this historic pandemic and this historic moment in time, I see this as an incredibly pivotal time for CalRecycle, for environmental quality in general. But as a pivotal time, I see it as an opportunity for us, for California to reimagine a new economy, to use the innovative spirit that California is known for to solve the waste problem, not just for our state, but for the entire country and for the entire planet. I really believe that with bright thinkers, dedicated thinkers like the people we have at CalRecycle and in the legislature, and teams of people like yourselves, that we are really well positioned to take a leadership role in solving the waste problem in California, the waste problem on the planet, and truly building the foundation for a circular economy for the entire globe. San Joaquin County is uniquely aware of the impact that climate change is having on California and the economy, and you all bring that to the work that you do together. And I think that that is really key to how we communicate and how we do the work that we do in waste reduction. When I started my career in environmental quality, we'll just say several decades ago, so as to not make me feel like, as tired as I am feeling today, we talked about waste as sort of this litter prevention, let's preserve the environment goal, which is a very laudable goal, but really, truly, waste reduction is so much bigger than preventing litter. It is preventing pollution, and it is mitigating the impacts of climate change and the devastating impacts of methane on our climate and on our direct ecosystems. San Joaquin Valley has known this for a long time. When I was with the Senate Environmental Quality Committee, we conducted hearings, gosh, almost 10 years ago across the state on climate change and climate resiliency and mitigation. And the most thoughtful hearing we had was in San Joaquin Valley, because the impacts of climate change were very real and felt in a very tangible way a decade ago in the San Joaquin Valley, between the impacts of extreme heat and the changes in our environment impacting our agricultural land, the impacts that drought has on a all too more frequent rate are very real for those of you who are living in the San Joaquin Valley. And I think that it is that experience that makes you uniquely positioned to help fight climate change, mitigate the impacts of climate change, and use this opportunity to explain what climate change is doing to our environment, to talk about how do we best address the issues that are causing climate change, like waste, which isn't traditionally thought of as a climate change issue. But I think, again, you are uniquely positioned, as am I, to communicate the way that waste and waste degradation is contributing to climate change and the impacts that climate change is having on our environment. To combat our climate crisis and begin a self-sustaining financial recovery that creates less pollution, California must lead in the transition to a circular economy. I feel like I use that term at least a dozen times a day, and I'm really hoping it becomes part of the vernacular of the people of the state of California, because I think there is not an understanding of what we mean when we talk about a circular economy. And again, today I really want to call on you to be my partner in helping to integrate the concept of a circular economy into everyday life, to get the idea that every product, when it is introduced to the market, should be introduced by that manufacturer, that distributor, that retailer, with the idea that it has not only a second life, but an eternal life, a third, fourth, fifth life, that we design everything we do to not end up in a landfill or as waste, but to have a new purpose at the end of its original purpose. And I really appreciate that this particular team of people is already thinking about that and has done so much work in the San Joaquin Valley to attract those companies, to attract that innovation to the San Joaquin Valley, to really help build that foundation of a circular economy. I want to be your partner in that. I think that the circular economy and building it here in California is going to be at the very base to solving our climate problem, our waste problem, and provide good, high-paying, non-polluting jobs in the state of California. As we are embarking on an economic recovery after the pandemic, this is, again, an opportunity for us to bring a new economy. As I talk about it in the office, we're going to create new money out of nowhere, much like the Silicon Valley did in the 1990s. I see building a circular economy as creating a brand new source of money, jobs, and opportunity here in the state of California. And we are particularly well positioned to do that because of the brain power that we have here, the support of people like Governor Newsom, who really wants to see that happen here, and the local government and state government and partnerships in the private sector that really truly want to be at the base of this. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fact that there are many countries across the globe that are moving much faster than we currently are. I'm not discouraged by that. I see this as my husband always says, betting on the underdog. California is and has always been able to excel when put to the test and put to the challenge. And so I really would like to work with all of you to really think about how do we build that circular economy. When I talk about a circular economy, I think about it in the context of not just recycling or just source reduction, but truly at its base, how do we encourage manufacturers when they are making something to think about its next life, but how do we also encourage remanufacturing? How do we get remanufacturing here in the state of California that is building the products that everybody wants and needs and is using, so that we can, in the very short term, I think about it in the next decade or two, get to a very zero waste economy. Hi, Chuck. I just saw your comment. So I also want to articulate that I don't think that this is an impossible task. I think a circular economy is a very real task, and that the disposable economy in which we are currently living and is exacerbated by COVID, has been exacerbated by this concept of a single-use lifestyle, is a brand new idea. This is really, if we think back on it, something that has really only occurred over the last generation, maybe the last 2 generations. When I was growing up in Sonoma County, I grew up helping out on my grandparents' ranch, much like the farms and ranches of the San Joaquin Valley. There wasn't waste service. You didn't have a garbage bin that you put out every week. We had to figure out how to deal with our own waste. And one of the great benefits of growing up on my grandparents' ranch was that benefit to me, not so much to them, was that my grandparents both grew up in the Great Depression, and they had a mindset, every day of their mindset, that waste was not an option, that was the negative byproduct of a lifestyle, and that it should be avoided at all costs. So I think, you know, when I was growing up and, well, we were living with them, there were 8 of us in their little house, 6 of us, my youngest brother and sister weren't born yet. There were 6 of us living in their little house. I don't think we could have filled up a trash can in a month. We composted, we reused everything. There was not, and when we did have waste, it was seen as an absolute failing on our part to properly see our place in the world. My grandmother used to, when the bottle bill was passed, I always think back on the, when we talk about bottle bill reform, she was just, I think, so excited about it because she would go and collect all of the cans on her bicycle and drive them into town once a week and redeem them. And she just thought that was the best thing ever, that we were not only not creating waste, but that she was getting paid to get rid of it. So I tell this story just to illustrate that if we really think back on our own childhoods and our parents, this concept of throwing things away and the growth of landfilling has really only happened in the last 2 generations. And so I take that as an opportunity and makes it relatively easy to readjust and our thinking and go back to a societal idea that the end goal should never be waste. Where avoidable, we should always be looking for opportunities to think about things differently and how they can have another life. And if we can truly get to this place, we will get there together, and we will get there in a way that protects our environment, protects their public health, and does so in a way that also very keenly protects our climate and helps mitigate the impacts of climate change, as well as we're embarking on implementation of 1383 and other statutes. We not only will be reducing our impact on the environment, but helping to fight climate change through sequestration and other measures. So like I said, I'd much prefer this to be a discussion today because I truly see this as the beginning of a conversation with all of you as we start a partnership together to reimagine California's waste economy into a circular economy, and really hoping that we can have an ongoing conversation in the coming years and really build this together. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Heidi, happy to take questions or comments.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much for being here. I know some people were showing up just because you were here. Of course, your big draw. And I'm not surprised at Chuck's first question. And of course, we've been seeing this question a lot, and a lot of people are talking about different technologies to solve our problems, such they're calling them advanced recycling technologies or enhanced technologies or conversion technologies or chemical recycling. There's a whole bunch of names out there right now. And I think Chuck is asking, you know, what do you see as the role of those technologies? And I would say there is not one label that to me is saying one technology. it's a basket of technologies and they're all different and might need separate responses, but in general, any response to that?
Thank you, Chuck, for that question, and thank you, Heidi. I think this is so incredibly important because as we talk about innovation, we do really need to talk about evolving technologies. And as we all know, and have participated in conversations, Chuck definitely, in the legislature, we know that gasification and chemical recycling and some of the other conversion technologies have been discouraged over the past decade or so as that technology was emerging because of the environmental and public health harms that they presented with the way the technology worked, whether it was emissions or dioxin or other byproducts that would be caused by use of that technology. I do think that this is an ongoing conversation and it needs to be an ongoing conversation because this technology is improving. The question becomes, is it improving in such a way that when we use it, we do not replace one environmental harm or one public health harm with another environmental or public health harm? And this is a conversation when I was in the Environmental Quality Committee, we would have a lot. How do we make sure that when we're addressing one environmental harm, we don't create a new one? And that is traditionally, in the past, not been enough of a question that in the last decade it became a keen question and the priority question as we allowed new technologies. So I think that there is a place to have this conversation and to have it now, that emergent technology needs to be a part of our solution. But the question then becomes, is that emerging technology, is it possible to engage that technology in such a way that it doesn't create a new or different harm?
Thank you for that response. And I would also add, when I did my introductory slides, I did remind everybody that the circular economy definition by the MacArthur Foundation includes 3 things. It's waste prevention and pollution first, which so far I haven't seen dealt with in these new technologies. In fact, I got into a bit of a debate with a professor from the University of Florida yesterday about this because he thinks syngas is great and there's no need for waste prevention and it doesn't work. Then it's keeping materials in use, which is really what these technologies are talking about, and then regenerative to nature, and that also doesn't seem to have been really addressed in these technologies yet that I've seen. So those were, again, I get worried about labels and people call things circular economy, but we're all using different definitions apparently, and that's part of the issue in having a healthy discussion. So thanks, Chuck, for that question. We'll move on to Frank Farrell from the Stockton Chamber of Commerce. He says that on the CalRecycle website, can we put the RMDZ program front and center? It seems to be buried. I'm sure everybody would like that
idea. I think I'm making a note to myself right now to talk to Maria when we're done here about how do we elevate RMDZ. We have been having a lot of conversations internally about RMDZ and other potential mechanisms that we could put in place, either currently within CalRecycle or otherwise in partnerships that we could embark on with GoBiz to better utilize RMDZ or other mechanisms to really encourage higher levels of remanufacturing attraction here in California. So, perhaps not a conversation for today, but would love to get all of your thoughts on RMDZ, how it could work better, and other things that have been a challenge. I know that this group has had a conversation with the secretary about some of the permitting and other issues. Again, probably not a conversation for today, but would love to have a detailed conversation with any of you that would like on how do we attract more business in California, and for those areas of the state that are truly interested in doing that, how do we best do that? I've been talking to a lot of the businesses that have either received RMDZ grants or loans and other grant or loan programs in CalRecycle, and trying to figure out how do we do more of that and do it better. So would love to have a conversation about that with all of you or a subgroup of you at some juncture.
Great. Yes, I think the Build Infrastructure Now group that was started with some of the RMDZ leaders and the Stockton Chamber of Commerce, we were just talking, I think it's been almost 10 years already. We've been trying to figure out how to build the infrastructure back here in California. So it was exciting to hear about you talking about Build Back Better and how that all relates. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but I think I have one for you. There was an earlier question about how the businesses could work with chambers to get feedstock or to get support. And you and I have both seen this at the state level. Some chambers are very, very helpful, really engaged, and then others, it seems like it just isn't, having constructive conversations is harder to have. And I think it's so important that we all talk honestly and openly together and figure out how we're going to close the loop. Do you have any suggestions on how we can all work better together, industry, our waste industry, advocates, and people who want to protect the environment all together, because we're all here and we're all part of the solution, but we can also all be part of the problem.
Well, I think we're both, right? We're part of the problem and the solution on a number of different platforms. So I would say, and this was, so I was having a really good conversation within the administration with a number of different, with GoBiz and CalRecycle and others last week, where, it all came back to feedstock. How do we ensure reliable feedstock, but how do we do it in a way that doesn't encourage the production of more virgin materials, that with the understanding that it becomes a new feedstock. So and we after a 3-hour meeting, we didn't come up with a good answer to that. I imagine this is a lot of very complicated conversations with a lot of different industries on how best to do that. I hadn't really thought about it from the context, Heidi, of how do we engage the chambers in doing that, but I think that's a great idea. And I'm thinking about, one of the benefits of an organization like yours is that you do bring about such great partnerships between local government, private companies, chambers, and then really if we could insert ourselves into the conversation at the state level to help do that, I would love to do that. So we could have a conversation about how do we engage chambers, how do we engage, because I think it would benefit all of us as we're trying to produce that true circular economy without the fits and starts, to figure out who needs what and where, and how do we produce it in a way that is responsible and again doesn't create an additional environmental harm.
Yeah, one thought I had just with your talking there is maybe having CalRecycle convene circular economy workshops that are kind of ongoing, and maybe every couple of months, where we go over what is a circular economy, what does that look like, invite the chambers, invite the businesses and the haulers and everybody, and really kind of get everybody at least talking the same language early on, and then talking about specifically how we solve it together.
I absolutely love that idea. I don't have any staff here in my home to kick me additional work. And so I'm going to go back and talk to our staff about how could we start, I know that some of those conversations have started, but if there's a more regular conversation that could be had where we can put some problems on the table and offer collective solutions, I love that idea, Heidi. I think we should definitely at least get that started.
And maybe GoBiz and
here. Website, RMDZ, circular economy workshops.
Yay! Yeah, because I really think it starts with the conversation and everybody just getting educated and talking the same language before we then get into the details of the who, the what, the when, the how. Because sometimes we skip the basics and we're talking and using terms differently, and then everybody gets confused.
Well, and I know that there are quite a few of you, I think 4 of you from the Recycling Commission that also participate in this group. And so thank you for that. I just want to highlight the fact that the Commission has done so much great thinking on this topic as well. So what we really just need to do is bring all of that great thinking, the great thinking of this group, we need to create a table where all of those thoughts can come together and we can start doing some creative problem solving together. So I absolutely love that idea.
Fantastic. I think that would be a wonderful thing that we could get going on. One other thing that was brought up earlier before you joined us was the issue of a fair free market and the fact that there's virgin subsidies, and the commission's starting to talk about this too, and we're going to see a proposal I think next week on this. But some, is there any discussion at the state level of what the state could do and the federal government, or encourage the federal government to do, to get subsidies off of the virgin materials that are really making it hard for us at the back end to make the numbers work?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely at the base of so many different conversations. I would say this isn't where I'm necessarily starting, because this is a lot of it has to do with the federal government. And so I think it needs to be a part of every conversation as we talk about building the circular economy. But I think where I go is creating a disincentive to use virgin materials. I think that is a faster way for us at the state level. Heidi knows this about me. I'm all about the fastest solution that I can get in place. And so one of the things that I know the secretary and I have been talking a lot about is how do you create a disincentive to use virgin materials, a disincentive to use those materials that may be, as I know a lot of the conversation today revolved around plastics and packaging. How do we create a disincentive for those single-use plastics, those single-use packaging that create such incredible harm, not only to our environment, to public health, to our economy? Right now, not only subsidies, but just the sheer convenience of those materials, the cost, obviously, of those materials make them very attractive. How do we make them not attractive? And I think what we need to do, and what the state of California could do, is create a disincentive, penalize those products that create the greatest harm, that aren't recyclable, that are going to break down and degrade our environment, our oceans, our waterways, that are contributing to our drinking water harm, our air quality harm. We should be penalizing those materials for being in the market. And if we can find a way to do that, those companies that are using those materials will necessarily stop and think about whether or not that is the best choice for them. So creating an economic disincentive could be the most powerful tool that we could put in place very quickly.
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons I kind of really got enamored with extended producer responsibility, because it takes the externalized costs and it puts it actually into the price of the product, so that people can really get in a free market. They see the true cost of that product, the whole life cycle cost of that product. Because we all know at end of life, if you have to pay for disposal costs, chances are it'll be illegally dumped, which is another huge problem we have in the state.
Well, and we've created, and I think, just the evolution of how we've dealt with recycling and waste, we've really made it societally the responsibility of the consumer and the government and the state to figure out how to deal with the waste stream and to pay for the end of life of these waste streams. That includes all of the environmental degradation. So in my mind, what extended producer responsibility or product stewardship is really intended to do, as Heidi's been fighting for, is to say, no, it isn't our job when we buy a product to know how to and pay for how to deal with it when we are done with that product. The manufacturer should be thinking about that when they manufacture that product. It should be built into that product how it's going to get to its next life. We've spent 35 years trying to figure out how to build a recycling system for every new product that seems to pop up into the economy. Those milk cartons are my new nemesis. My children love them because they're so convenient, and it's great that they have can make milk shelf stable. But wouldn't it have been all the more amazing if the manufacturer and the inventor of that container, figured out how to deal with it after my kids are done drinking their milk, that would have been amazing. And it would have prevented so much environmental harm and so much time and energy from both private industry, NGOs, and government to figure out what to do with it. So it really, I think, I couldn't agree more, Heidi, that extended producer responsibility needs to be a part of this, if not the key part of how we actually get to a circular economy. And I think one of the ways that I've really, I've seen an immediate response was the minimum content legislation that was passed last year. I mean, between us kids, quietly, it's not the most groundbreaking piece of legislation. I said, that's great. It's minimum content for bottles. Great, sure, whatever. They're already doing this. But it was incredible what happened after that. What the major beverage manufacturers did just past the passage of that, where they started competing to get to 100% recycled content, because we passed a law that said you had to get to, I think it's 30% or some, smaller percentage. So I really started thinking of minimum content and other structural things that really require not just producer responsibility, but say you have to meet this goal. And if you don't meet this goal, here are the penalties associated with it. If your product isn't recyclable in the state of California, then you shouldn't sell it here. Or if you do sell it here, we're going to charge you for the impact that you're having to our environment and to our people. Getting kind of tough in my old age.
Well, you've brought up so many good points. I'm trying to figure out what to say next because I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. But
Heidi,
yeah.
Heidi, we did miss a question about 10 minutes ago from Steve Lotzi at 11:18.
Oh, okay. Let's see. Thank you, Director Wagner. CalRecycle's primary responsibilities are regulatory flowing from legislation, including SB 1383. Building the circular economy is more entrepreneurial in nature, as evidenced by companies we heard from today. How do you see that CalRecycle can leverage green market forces to go further, faster, and faster on waste reduction and climate action?
Wow, that was so many questions in one question.
I know.
Let me see if I can get there. So, well, let's start with 1383. And you're absolutely right. CalRecycle evolved from the waste board about a decade ago to be a regulatory agency, and we are still growing into our role as a regulatory department, one that I take very seriously, and that the most important aspect of being a regulatory agency in my mind is consistent and transparent enforcement of the laws that are on the books. And so when we talk about 1383, I think, well, two things. One, that is very key to our role as a regulatory agency. Our job is to make sure that that law gets implemented and enforced in a very consistent and transparent way. But 1383, at its very base, as you all know, is a climate bill. It is meant to mitigate, reduce, and eventually eliminate the short-lived climate pollutants associated with methane from various types of waste. So in my mind, with specifically to 1383, we'll get to the broader circular economy in a second, but in 1383, I look at that as an opportunity for us to set about a very firm and consistent and transparent foundation for how are we going to reduce waste overall, but focused on organics. I think meeting that 75% target by 2025 is one of our key mandates. And you're absolutely right. I am the regulator. I am not the one actually implementing. So what I can do in helping local jurisdictions and communities implement that is with the entirety of CalRecycle, and we've made this an entirety of CalRecycle objective, figure out what tools that we can help produce to help local jurisdictions and communities implement programs that will make us as a state overall successful. So I do think that successful implementation of 1383 is part of the foundation of building a circular economy, because philosophically, at its very base, it is how do we ensure that everything is going to its next best life, right? So even when we're talking about organics waste, if we're talking about food waste, obviously we're not going to reuse a lot of that. But one of the things that I became most excited about when I joined the CalRecycle team was the food recovery program. It is simply a grant program that we embarked on in 2018 that has where we've given out roughly $20 million. I think maybe a little over that at this juncture. But by the end of 2020, we had given out $20 million, I believe in 68 jurisdictions, projects. I don't have the numbers in front of me. But we facilitated 86 million additional meals being distributed in communities across the state. That is the circular economy. It is thinking about everything we do as not being a waste, as not having an end life, but where should this go and what is its next best life? If my apple can't be redistributed, then I should be composting it. You know, if when we cut our grass, that should go to a different type of composting facility, but we should be looking at every single thing. And so 1383 for me is one of the pillars of building the circular economy in California, because it's already on the books. If we do this successfully, we are going to start to change the societal ideas of circular economy. So that goes to the second part of your question of what I think CalRecycle can do to actually encourage that entrepreneurship in our state. I think what we can do is very much help facilitate building that foundation and building those pillars. One, through our education program. We are currently building, we're in the process of a 3-year public education campaign that we are building out to very much try to change the way every Californian thinks about their waste. We all can remember the commercials about litter from the night, well, maybe not all of us. Some of us can remember the commercials about with the Native American on the side of the highway crying about the litter. The fact that I still have that imprinted on my brain 30 plus years later, and it had such an incredible impact on the way I saw my behavior, is exactly what we need to do here statewide. And I think CalRecycle can play a key role with our partnerships with organizations like yours to embark on that education. And then, you know, I think working with the legislature to help change the state's policies and change our recycling programs to and build new programs around grants and loans, and working with our partners at GoBiz to create programs that will attract companies to the state of California is something that is a real priority for me this year. So hopefully I got to all of your questions.
I think that was all the 2 questions in one. I think you got it all. Excellent job. And I'm thinking we play off. The next question is related to from Peter. Should local governments start requiring post-consumer recycled content in everything? Or is that the role of the state, like with the bottle legislation? For example, local government ordinances could require minimum post-consumer content in foodware ordinances like they did with PCR paper and shopping bags. We did talk about this earlier, that the commission did recommend that the state agency by recycle campaign be updated. There is a bill in the legislature to do that by Assemblymember Bennett. And so I was encouraging people to follow that, but also, you know, that would help benefit local governments because they can buy off the state contracts. So.
Yeah, completely agree, Heidi. I think I'm a big believer on government leading by example. And I think the SABRAC program is a great way to do that. And I'm very encouraged by Assemblymember Bennett's leadership in updating that statute. And, you know, without taking a position, because I'm not allowed to do that. I think that there is a great opportunity here for us to look at these things. I also I look at things like SB 1335 that required recyclable or compostable foodware in our cafeterias and restaurants in state agencies as an important marker too. And we're, it's very worrisome how little of that material is currently available in the market. And so when a state like the size of California takes that action, is a real market indicator, but it's even better when our local governments join us in that fight, because they truly do make the statement that this is the expectation. I know that, cities like Santa Monica have embarked on those types of ordinances. I know that they are a pretty heavy lift, but perhaps when joining the state in something like that, it's less of a heavy lift. So I love the idea of doing that at the local level, because again, it's something that we are more powerful when we come together over these things, and we send a real indication to the market when we do that, and other states and governments follow when we do it.
Right, and it does really, we talked earlier about voting with your dollars. Yeah. And especially when they're public dollars, making sure we're voting for the stuff we want to see happen in the market. Because if people stop voting for something by buying it, they stop making it, and they think about what does a consumer want. So it does have a big impact.
And the argument against that has always been the cost. But, and I'll go back to, again, my previous hat in the Environmental Quality Committee. When we talk about the cost, we only ever talk about the upfront cost. And so while a styrofoam clamshell may be cheaper to buy to put that hamburger in, it certainly isn't cheaper for government to deal with over the course of its lifetime, right? So the state of California and local governments are all responsible for dealing with everybody's waste. So in the long run, we save ourselves an incredible amount of money by not using those regrettable materials that can't be recycled or composted, and that we, as a society, we will be dealing with for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Yes, and the latest research just found plastics in placentas in human beings, which is unbelievable that we're getting to that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so Chuck has another question. Is there legislation to delay the SB 1383? If there's legislation to delay the SB 1383 regs, will CalRecycle be able to proceed with the approval of the alternative technologies that are required to be equal or better than composting? And such approval has been delayed because the regs don't take effect until January of 2022.
Well, Chuck and I were on a different panel last week where he made this point, and I think this is a really important point because I hadn't thought about it until Chuck said it last week in that context. But yeah, if my read, and I shouldn't say my legal team or my legislative team's read, but after Chuck mentioned it, I went and read the legislation myself, and I do read it the same way, Chuck, that if you delay implementation of the regulations, you delay implementation of the entirety of the regulations. So I think it's worth a conversation. We're early on in the legislative year about when we talk about delay, what truly is the problem that you're trying to solve? I mean, I think your point on approvals of alternative technologies is an important one. I would add to that, maybe not something you would necessarily agree with, but when we delay the overall regulatory package, we send an indication to the market about not only the alternative technology approval, but when will that technology or when will those companies be needed? And I think a 1-year delay results in a much longer delay in terms of the infrastructure being built here in the state of California to deal with organics, the organics waste stream. So what is it truly that people are struggling with in implementation of the regulations, and how do we address that as opposed to a blanket delay? Seems like a worthwhile conversation to have. Without me taking a position.
Right, because she can't do that because the governor has to give the okay on positions on bills.
I'm just very focused, and I know, and I feel very comfortable saying this because it's obviously very key to his message, that in order for us to meet our climate goals, we have to stay on track on a lot of these climate programs. And so I'm very worried personally that we're not going to get to the 75% organics reduction target if we don't start today. I mean, really, ultimately, that we didn't start in some jurisdictions didn't start in 2016 when the legislation was passed. I think and I recognize that 75% reduction was sort of an arbitrary number. It wasn't scientifically based, but it is very key to us getting to a zero waste economy. And I'm very worried, as we know, the potency of methane. If we don't achieve this, how are we going to reach our climate goals, and how are we truly going to get to a place where we are fighting climate change?
Yeah. And speaking of climate change, I just put into the chat that NRDC made a presentation to our Recycling Commission Market Development Committee on, and thanks to Manuel for bringing them to our attention, the issue with tissue. But literally, we're cutting down native intact forests in the boreal forests in Canada for toilet paper. And it's really got to stop because they sequester so much carbon. So there's a bill in the legislature on that. I cannot remember the number, but that's another thing as far as voting with your dollars, making sure that you're not buying toilet paper from companies that are literally cutting down the virgin forest for that. I think I'll ask one more quick question and then we'll move on to closing today out. And I so appreciate your time, Rachel. This has been incredible.
This is great. I love this. I just wish we could be in person.
I know. Hopefully soon. Those vaccines are coming. Carrots and truth in labeling. We'll do this. I think one of the things that's really been hard to get contamination under control is the fact that the public is just horribly confused. They don't have time to read a phone book of instructions on how to recycle or which goes in which bin. They've got chasing arrows on things that aren't recyclable. They throw it in the recycling bin, then that's contaminant for us. We've got, just mixed messages to the public because every single jurisdiction is responsible at the back end instead of, uniformity at the front end. And I guess one of the things that we've been thinking about at the commission is, how do we get to the real front end? I mean, California is just California. Can we get national standards on what is recyclable, labeling, so the public can really understand no matter where they move in this country, it's clear. Because I go to other countries and as soon as I get off the plane, there's messaging about, here's one. This is one I got from Europe. It was literally in the train station about that they make recycled bottles into new bottles and so forth. And it was how to recycle is everywhere. And in our country, it's different everywhere and very confusing. And do you have any suggestions or discussion on what we could do federally, especially now that so many Californians are in the federal government?
Yeah, so I think this is an important conversation to have with our partners in the federal government. And I know that Secretary Blumenfeld has had conversations specifically on this point with our new US EPA secretary. So I know that conversation is starting. I think, I appreciate, I believe it's Senator Allen's bill. That is the truth in labeling bill. I think that is a wonderful start. Again, I'm not taking a position, but that those chasing arrows have meaning. Like I said, CalRecycle is embarking on a public education campaign very specifically because of this issue, that people really truly don't know where to put things in the blue bin. Lets them feel that, what was the term I heard? Oh, wish cycling. That, we can wish it into something else. So, I think at the state level, what is very important, and again, that path of least resistance, or maybe the greatest resistance, but the fastest path, is that EPR path that, Heidi, you and I have been working on, and many others on this call, Nick and others have been working on for many, many years, is that the best way to get things to the next life is for it to be designed to be that way, and not designing a system around the theoretical concept of recycling or the theoretical concept of a next life, but saying, no, you're responsible for ensuring that system is in place. and creating a disincentive for everything else in the state of California. And I think the rest of the country will follow if we can put a system in place that says we're only selling things here that can be recycled, that are part of a product stewardship or a circular economy model. Otherwise, you're going to pay a premium for being here.
Wow. Well, this has just been absolutely fantastic. Rachel, thank you so much for being here and for being open to all these questions and discussion. And, you know, my takeaways from this are hopefully we'll get some sort of a circular economy workshops and bringing people together in the state, because I truly believe, as you said, that, you know, as California goes, so does the nation. And we have an opportunity to do a lot of good work here that will help the whole nation with their waste management system. And a lot of companies say we would like national solutions. We agree. Now we have to all work together to figure out what that looks like and actually, you know, work together to get that done, whether it's labeling or resin types or collection systems. So really look forward to that. And hopefully now everybody understands why I was so excited when Rachel got appointed. We're extremely lucky to have you at the state level. So I think with that, somebody just said also we should have a design contest. And actually,
I love that idea. We talked about that with GoBiz last week. It was like, let's make this a contest.
Yeah, I think there is one in the plastics industry, or a couple of the industries have design contests. And I think that's a great idea. And especially with the new generation of designers being taught in schools, you know, coming up with creative thinking on the next generation of products. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up and say I want to thank Frank Farrell and the Stockton Chamber of Commerce and the Green Team for always leading the way for these healthy statewide conversations. And we even have people from Austin, Texas today and others that follow us at the National Stewardship Action Council. So you're actually having an even national impact, Frank. So thank you to Doug and to Lyndon and especially to all of our speakers and Director Wagner. Thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure to see you all. And Heidi, always a pleasure to talk with you.
I know. We got to do lunch soon.
Yes.
Hey, Rachel.
Yes.
Give me a call.
Okay. I will do that, Frank. Adding it to my list.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Lyndon. Okay. Lyndon, go ahead.
I want to thank our sponsors one more time, which is the California Recycling Market Development Zone Association and the California Green Business Network, the Community Champions of Kaiser Permanente, King Card Club, and Port of Stockton. And thank you to the Green Team San Joaquin once again, and appreciate everybody attending. And we will see you again, hopefully in person. We're confident next year. Thank you.
We are posting the video as well. So
yeah, and we will as well on our YouTube page. So they'll have double ways to get at the videos.
Right.
Excellent job. Thanks everyone for coming.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Frank. Bye-bye.
Anytime. Okay.